Chapter 130, Seeing Lin Qian again. No matter if it was dam making or forging, it all carried risks. This risk didn't just mean the risk of failure, but danger as well. The loss of all Ling power, souls being torn out, Ling power reversing, and being poisoned. The lightest would be serious bodily harm, the most severe would be the destruction of the soul. If one was processing something that was far beyond their abilities, the dangers would increase several times over. Yao beasts needed cultivators to kill them, and those Ling grasses and medicine that had lived for hundreds and thousands of years, would they let others kill them easily? All beings in the world naturally had their own defenses. Those weak-looking entities, the viciousness and dangers contained in their weak bodies could easily kill a person. Zuo might frequently do some risky things, but at the core, he was an extremely cautious person. It was only when he didn't have enough assets and he had no choice that he took these risks. The lowest level cultivators, if they didn't bet with their life, what could they bet with? But right now, his needs and the others' offer hadn't reached the point that needed him to risk so much. "I'm sorry, I'm very busy right now," Zuo said expressionlessly. "Brother Zuo." Suddenly, a slightly familiar voice came from behind him. Zuo stilled and turned around. Sometime unknown to him, a white-clothed male was standing behind him. His features seemed slightly familiar. Where had he seen them? Wasn't this Lin Qian? Zuo quickly remembered where he had seen this person, especially when there were not many that were as handsome as this. The rich young master, the fat sheep. This guy hadn't left? "Lin Qian, you haven't left yet?" Zuo had a pretty good impression of this handsome guy. Meeting him again, he was quite happy. The sword test conference is such an interesting event. If I left, and didn't see Brothers with spectacular performance, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. Lin Qian smiled as he said, his tone warm and humble, subtly closing the distance between the two. Zuo was slightly embarrassed by Lin Qian's words, and said, "I was just lucky." Lin Qian's knowledge far exceeded him. His little tricks were slightly clever, but that depended on who he was using them on. However, his zombie face could not blush. "Luck is a kind of strength." Lin Qian laughed as he stated in a forthright manner. He turned towards the black gauze hat-wearing Su, and said with a slight smile, "Didn't think I would meet Su Shimi here. Please send my greetings to Wenjinren." "Who are you?" Su's voice was cold, a flash of ice streaking through her eyes behind the black gauze. The light robes billowed as though she was going to attack at any moment. Suddenly being called out by name by a stranger, she was shocked and angry. The expressions of the surrounding shopkeepers changed. Zuo felt the temperature around him drop and was shocked. Su, who had been already mysterious in his eyes, became even more powerful and mysterious. Lin Qian was not affected at all, smiling, and stating, "Shimi has never seen me before and naturally would not recognize me." He didn't seem to want to keep going with the question. He smiled at Zuo, saying, "Brother Zuo, why are you not interested in Su Shimi's suggestion?" "According to my knowledge, other than the prizes, for the first 10 people, if they are local disciples, there are also other benefits." "Other benefits?" Zuo stilled and scratched his head. "How come I haven't heard of this?" Destiny cannot be revealed." Lin Qian smiled. "Even with the greatest benefits, one needs to be alive to enjoy it." Zuo shrugged his shoulders uncaringly. He could barely manage to process the 4th-grade cold magnet, but to carve formations onto the sword billets and to use dying flowing moon in the process, it was far beyond of his abilities. The two of them had met before, and Zuo was much more casual. Lin Qian liked Zuo's casual attitude as well. Hearing this, he laughed. Brother Zuo is not confident. As Zuo and Lin Qian talked, Su maintained her silence. She wasn't dumb and could see that Lin Qian was helping her. From that, it could be seen that Lin Qian did not have ill intentions. Zuo snickered, "No way about it. I'm only in Zhuji. If I'm in Ningmai, if you come find me, as long as the price is right, there's no problem." The black gauze of Su's hat rippled. When Zuo was in Ningmai, how long did she have to wait? There were too many uncertainties in cultivation. No one could guarantee that they would reach a certain stage in an amount of time. In the process of cultivation, there were way too many strange occurrences that even the greatest geniuses could not avoid. So Brother Zuo is worried about this problem. I actually know a way that might solve it. Lin Qian said in a heavy voice. Let's hear it. Zuo said. Lin Qian might have vast amounts of knowledge, but the problem of cultivation was not something that could be solved easily. Brother Zuo's spirit is exceptionally strong. Why don't you consider a double-chained 4-turn fire formation? Lin Qian's words were like a streak of lightning that crossed the sky. It was like someone had cast a paralysis spell on him. He was struck dumb. Double-chained 4-turn fire formation, double-chained 4-turn fire formation. Zuo's eyes were unfocused like he was going crazy as he muttered to himself. He dropped to the floor, a few jingshi in his hands as he started to set up a formation on the ground. Lin Qian waved his hand at one of the shopkeepers who instantly understood and closed the doors to the store. Su started with slight shock at Lin Qian but maintained her silence. She knew that Zuo was in the middle of an epiphany. Epiphanies were states that could only be encountered through luck but never through skill. If it was interrupted, it was hard for the person to regain that wonderful state. Lin Qian suddenly beckoned with his hand at Su and turned to walk to another room. Su hesitated for a beat but still followed. When Su walked into the room, the light in the room suddenly flashed, and the sounds from the outside instantly disappeared. She was very shocked. The cultivation of the person in front of her was unfathomably deep. Su shimmy, don't worry. This is just a sound-blocking jinji. Lin Qian smiled as he said, is Shimmy still suspicious about my identity? Finishing, he took out a jade pendant. Does Shimmy recognize this item? Su's gaze landed on the jade pendant in Lin Qian's hands, and her body trembled. She could not maintain her composure, a heart lake pendant. Lin Qian smiled and generously handed the jade pendant in his hands to Su. Su took over the jade pendant. The little lake on the jade pendant was like a living entity, constantly changing. Occasionally, the wind would cause ripples, or the surface would be as smooth as a mirror. Feeling the familiar presences coming from the jade pendant as well as the jinji unique to her sect, she instantly knew that the jade pendant in her hand was the token of the sect, a heart lake pendant. But, she had never heard of another elder in the sect that still had a disciple. Yet this heart lake pendant was real. Those that possessed a heart lake pendant were all core elders of the sect. Her master had one. But even the best disciples of the sect, her and Gu Rongping, did not have a heart lake pendant. The sect had a rule, seeing the jade pendant was as seeing the Jinren. Su bowed, and made a greeting again, Shu. Shimmy is polite. Lin Qian returned the greeting and said, Shimmy and I are about the same age. It's better for us to refer to each other this way. I have not returned to the sect, so there is no basis to call me Shu. Su didn't know what to say and kept her silence. She was still in the middle of a deep shock. From when Lin Shixiang had appeared until now, she still was not able to see Shixiang's true power. The more hidden it was, the more awed she was. This meant that Lin Shixiang's strength was at least 2 levels above her. She wondered which elder had raised such a terrifying person. She suddenly felt lucky that Lin Shixiang was a disciple of her sect. The shopkeepers saw the light flashing outside the room, and perceptively moved their eyes away. When Zuo opened his eyes, Su and Lin Qian entered his vision. Congratulations, Brother Zuo. Lin Qian smiled and said, after today, Brother Zuo's road to wealth has become even wider. Zuo, who had just gathered his thoughts, was happy when he heard Lin Qian's words. He raised his hands in a greeting, I have to thank Brother Lin. Without Brother Lin's guidance, I wouldn't have thought about this method at all. This is Brother Zuo's own skill. I just said some things, and hadn't thought that Brother Zuo could really make them into reality. I'm very shocked. Lin Qian smiled as he shook his head. Zuo didn't say any more. He lowered his head as he savored the wonderful state he had been in. It was very hard for him to describe the state he had been in. At the same time, he found it hard to remember what he had realized, but he felt that a little thin paper window had been broken. Many places that he hadn't noticed before, and were ambiguous, were now evident. This feeling was really too great. He stood there, slowly savoring it. It was only when his mind had calmed down that he raised his head again. At this time, he suddenly found that, without him noticing, it had been more than 4 hours. Looking at the tincture fragments on the ground, he was slightly embarrassed. He had experimented with formations in someone else's store and actually hadn't been thrown out. This store was really easy going. When he glanced past the shut door to the store, he was slightly shocked. Then he saw Lin Qian wave a hand for the shopkeeper to open the door, and he understood. He became even more curious about Lin Qian's origins. From the words that Lin Qian said, he knew that this fat sheep definitely had a high background, but looking at it now, it was much stronger than he had imagined. Looking at the respectful demeanor the shopkeepers had towards Lin Qian, Zhuo Mo couldn't help but speculate. Was Lin Qian the owner of the 100 Treasure Flying Pavilion? But the first time that he had encountered Lin Qian hadn't appeared to have ever come to Dongfu. Noticing Zhuo Mo's gaze, Lin Qian smiled easily and said, "Does Brother Zhuo have some chance now at forging?" If Brother Zhuo agrees, this 5-colored pagoda can be considered one part of the payment for Brother Zhuo. Other than what Shimi has promised Brother Zhuo, I can add some more. In the future, if Brother Zhuo comes here, every purchase will be 20% off. How about it? Is Brother Zhuo satisfied now? Very rich benefits. Disregarding the value of the 5-colored pagoda, just this 20% off was extremely valuable. Just as everyone thought that these were enough to move Zhuo Mo shook his head. "Oh, if Brother Zhuo has some other request, please state it." Lin Qian made a gesture of request. "I'll take the job." Zhuo Mo surprised everyone once again. As to payment, Brother Lin just paid it right now. Just as everyone was dazed, Zhuo Mo pointed at the 5-colored pagoda. "I'll buy the 5-colored pagoda." Finishing, he took out a heap of tincture. Everyone's faces changed simultaneously. Of low cultivation, with a face of a zombie, Zhuo Mo suddenly became honest and good in their eyes. Behind the gauze, a strange expression came onto Sue's face. The Zhuo Mo in front of her was like another person compared to what she knew before. At this time, nothing could be seen of Zhuo Mo's wretchedness or greed. Was this the guy's true personality? As expected, Master was not wrong. You could not judge a person by their appearance. Just as she was pondering it, she suddenly heard Zhuo Mo hurriedly add with heartache. "Remember the discount." Chapter 131, The Wondrous Abilities of the 5-Colored Pagoda. Zhuo Mo left with a heap of items. Other than the 5-colored pagoda, he had a large pile of various materials. He had spent all the tincture he had. Now that he had the dimensional ring, he completely didn't have to worry about the problem of weight. The materials of the 100 Treasure Flying Pavilion was extremely high quality. Other than here, Zhuo Mo couldn't think he could have brought what he did anywhere else in Dongfu. In his mind, after this visit, it would be a long time before he could come to the 100 Treasures Flying Pavilion again. In any case, he could use the materials, so he wasn't wasting anything. Looking at the piles of materials in the dimensional ring, Zhuo Mo's heart was very content, and it washed away the heartache from spending all his tincture. He also released a long breath. He was not worried anymore. Pooh, I'll let you understand what it was to be penniless. He also had 4 pieces of 4th-grade cold magnet, 1 bottle of intense fire Dan, 1 bottle of dying flowing moon, and a jade scroll. The intense fire Dan was a payment. The jade scroll recorded the formations that needed to be carved onto the 4 sword billets. The moment Zhuo Mo left the 100 Treasure Flying Pavilion, he heard Pooh ask urgently, "Do you have tincture?" Ha 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 ha, Zhuo Mo couldn't stop himself from roaring with laughter. "What are you laughing about?" Pu Yao, who had just woke up, was evidently a beat slower. No. No more, Zuemo tried very hard to stop laughing and said deliberately seriously, "Why didn't you say it earlier? I just bought some things, and spent all the jingxue." "Not even one left?" Pu Yao asked dumbly. "Not even one left." Zuemo replied certainly. Zuemo was extremely happy and smug to be able to get one over Pu Yao. Sitting on Silly Bird, he hummed a weird tune. As Silly Bird moved her wings, she rolled her eyes. After a while, she couldn't bear it anymore, and started to honk, trying to suppress Zuemo's voice. In a good mood, Zuemo suddenly became angry, throwing a punch to Silly Bird's head. "What are you honking about? Can't you hear Ji is singing?" Silly Bird became dizzy and it took a while to recover. Her head low, she flew on weakly. Zuemo continued to howl at the top of this throat. Once they managed to reach the little West Wind yard, the moment they landed, Silly Bird stumbled over to the water to throw up. Zuemo glanced at Silly Bird, humming, not able to see Ji's beauty, "It is your greatest crime," returning to his own little house, and pondering over everything that happened today, Zuemo sank into thought. There were many suspicious things about this incident. Like Lin Qian's identity. The first time he met Lin Qian had appeared to be a person that was not familiar with Dong Fu at all. But looking at it today, he seemed to be very close with the 100 Treasure Flying Pavilion's owner. What surprised Zuemo was that Lin Qian had referred to Su as Shimmy, but Su didn't seem to recognize him. Su's origin was a mystery. Adding on an even more mysterious Lin Qian, Zuemo suddenly felt that the incident today was even more bewildering. Su was slightly better, but Zuemo could not clearly see through the constantly smiling Lin Qian, not one bit. Behind the warm smile, there was something that Zuemo was instinctively wary of. That was why he had persisted in buying the 5-colored pagoda by himself. Even though he had spent jingxue, but he wanted to feel comfortable. It was a very bad feeling to owe someone a favor, and especially owe someone that he didn't know anything about. That was just not discourteous, but very dangerous. "I still have many things to do. I still have to find answers," Zuemo said to himself. His attention turned to the 5-colored pagoda that he bought today. This was an incompletely forged 5-element talisman. No wonder it couldn't be sold in Dongfu. Zuemo understood when he thought about it. Dongfu was dominated by sword xiu. Most xiuxia of the 5 elements were dan makers and forgers. Dongfu didn't have any dan making and forging xiuxia that were wealthy enough to go to the 100 Treasures Flying Pavilion to spend 50 pieces of 4th-grade jingxue to buy a talisman. A half-forged talisman that could sell for 50 pieces of 4th-grade jingxue, it was enough to prove it was not ordinary. Zuemo could only celebrate his good luck. If this 5-colored pagoda was complete, with his pitiful cultivation, he wouldn't be able to control it. He studied the jade scroll that roaming xiu had left behind. Zuemo managed to get the general gist of the roaming xiu's intentions. He had to sigh with amazement. This roaming xiu had such great ambitions. This roaming xiu wanted to create a complete 5-element world inside the 5-colored pagoda. Inside the world, 5 balls of 5-element energy would be continuously processed, and, in the end, form a base source of 5 elements. They would birth and subdue each other inside the pagoda, forming a small world at equilibrium. The essence of 5-element energies would freely change within the pagoda. As to what this 5-element would transform into, even the roaming xiu that was the creator couldn't predict. Of course, that was just the final goal. That roaming xiu was not an impractical person. Before this talisman met its final goal, the pagoda still had many uses. The 5-colored pagoda was a very unique container. Anything that was put in would be quickly separated into its component elemental energies. Of course, if what was put in was higher grade than the grade of the 5-colored pagoda, it naturally was not possible. Also, if it was used to cast a spell from the 5 elements, the effect would multiply. The 5-color pagoda was an experimental talisman, so in the Jade Scroll, there were many speculations the creator had made, but that did not have much to do with Zuemo right now. The talisman was not something he could complete at the moment. Zhuemo was doubtful that he could even complete it when he was in Ningmai. But it was fine if he did not complete it. The maker had already set up the basic skeleton. For Zhuemo, what he needed to do was simple. He had to put in 5 element materials. Tilting his head to think for a second, Zhuemo suddenly flicked his finger. A strand of milky white flame flew from his finger and entered the 5-colored pagoda. The bright red middle level of the 5-colored pagoda suddenly lit up. As the stalagmite fire entered, it was quickly deconstructed into fire energy that circled around the second level of the 5-element pagoda. Gold, wood, water, fire, earth. The tip of the tower was gold, the base was earth. Zhuemo could clearly feel that the fire element energy inside the 5-colored pagoda was a few fractions stronger than before. The red light around the pagoda dissipated, but the red level was more red than before. Zhuemo had expected this but was still surprised. It was not surprising that the stalagmite fire could increase the amount of fire element energy. However, the stalagmite fire was a cold fire. This didn't seem to change the effect on the pagoda. He couldn't understand after thinking it over. Zhuemo decided to not think about it, and continuously threw materials into the pagoda. As the materials were put into the pagoda, they would quickly broken down into 5-element energy, but the color of the pagoda did not change. Was it that the grade was not high enough? Zhuemo sensitively caught the crux of the matter. What he had thrown in had been first-grade materials, so the 5-colored pagoda did not respond. Hesitating for a second, he gritted his teeth and threw in a 3rd-grade green fragrant wood. The moment the green fragrant wood was thrown in, the green light of the wood level suddenly lit up. The wood elemental energy inside instantly grew bigger. Having proved what he had suspected, Zhuemo was not very happy, but sucked in a cold breath. Whoa-oh! He had thrown in a 3rd-grade green fragrant wood, but the wood element energy inside the pagoda had just increased just that little bit. How many high-level materials would he have to add in to fill it? Even more importantly, it needed good materials. Zhuemo guessed that when the 5-element energy inside reached a certain level, it would not be satisfied with 3rd-grade materials. By that time, it would require 4th level, 5th level. It was like a bucket of cold water had been poured on his head. Zhuemo's excitement instantly cooled greatly. He was in poverty right now. He definitely could not use expensive materials to fill this bottomless hole. His idea of continuing to process it was quickly killed in its infancy. He started to study the other uses of the 5-colored pagoda. As he studied the jade scroll, and examined the 5-colored pagoda, Zhuemo did find a very practical use. Zhuemo found the 5-element energies inside the 5-colored pagoda could be taken out for his use. This discovery made him exhilarated. Shouja of the 5 elements usually needed to form their own 5-element energies. For example, Shouja that specialized in fire would use scriptures from the very beginning to turn the Ling power inside the body into fire Ling power to release fire-oriented spells. As the person's cultivation deepened, the Ling power inside the body would automatically become fire element energies. Fire element energy was purer than fire-oriented Ling power, and after continuous processing, it would become even more pure. At the end, it would form a fire element source that would emanate from his entire body. Zhuemo was still at the stage that he could only turn Ling power into 5-element Ling power. But as long as there was 5-element energy inside the 5-colored pagoda, he could take it out and easily cast many kinds of 5-element spells. The power of these spells would far surpass the power of spells he could cast by himself. The only thing he found pitiful was that the 5-element energies in the 5-colored pagoda did not replenish after use. It needed him to continuously replenish it. Only after it was completed and could form the 5-element sources would it naturally produce 5-element energies. That was as far away from Zhuemo like the stars in the sky. Zhuemo's calculations were extremely abnormal. He was calculating how much 5-element energy a spell would require, then he would turn the equivalent of the amount of 5-element energy into 3rd-grade Ling grass, then the Ling grass into Jingshi. Fuck. So expensive. Zhuemo's hands shook from heartache. He instantly decided that he would not use the 5-element energies inside the pagoda unless he really had to. These days, even good talismans were this expensive. He could afford to buy it, but not use it. But even so, the 5-colored pagoda was very useful for Zuemo. He could use it to increase his control over the 5 elements. It could be used in ling farming, dan making, forging and formations. A pretty good little thing. Pu Yao suddenly sneaked out. Looking at the 5-colored pagoda in Zuemo's hands, his expression was not good. Zuemo's hairs stood as Pu Yao looked at him, shamefaced. However, his hands were not slow and threw the pagoda into the dimensional ring. Not bad, you even have a dimensional ring now. Pu Yao's tone became even more unfriendly. He finally realized why there was no more Jingshi. This is an investment for making Jingshi in the future. Without investments, how will anything be produced? Zuemo blathered on, his heart having a bad feeling. It seemed you are very unsatisfied with me. Pu Yao's face suddenly calmed down and he started to slowly pick at his fingernails. Those barefoot were not afraid of those wearing shoes. The penniless Zuemo told himself this and his courage rose. It's because what you give me each time sucks. Sucks. Pu Yao's expression was spectacular, and dumbstruck. It would have been better not to mention it. Once the topic came up, the more Zuemo thought, the angrier he got. He jumped up and started cursing as he pointed at Pu Yao's nose. You even have the face to mention it. When did you give something good? Embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, almost caused GE to lose my little life. What Yao seed and Mo matrix, it caused GE's Ling power to not grow anymore. Fragrance knowledge my ass. That Een bead, a bunch of Jindan almost skinned GE, and cooked GE's bones into soup. You are a fraudulent merchant. Your goods are crap. Pu Yao stared, dumbstruck, at the infuriated Zuemo. Chapter 132 Healing Wounds. As Zuemo stormed and raged and swore, Pu Yao was left completely struck dumb. They aren't crap, Pu Yao dumbly wanted to explain. If they aren't crap, then what are they? Zuemo glared. Realizing that he had been suppressed by Zuemo's presence, Pu Yao instantly became irritated. His right eye narrowed, revealing an extremely long red blade. In a cold voice, he said, "Oh, what do you want to say?" Zuemo couldn't help but stop breathing. Meeting Pu Yao's cold and strange gaze, he instantly shrunk back. I just meant, you have to give me things that don't have side effects. I am Yao. Pu Yao said faintly, the road that I understand is different from you Shouja. It is normal to have side effects. Pu Yao's meaning was extremely clear. He could not be blamed for the side effects. He was also stating that the things he would give in the future will also have side effects. If Pu Yao decided to be unreasonable, Zuemo could do nothing about it. The two were vastly different in power and, naturally, their right to speak was not equal. Zuemo could only choose to remain silently defiant. Pu Yao's gaze became even more unfriendly. Zuemo could only bear it. He knew that if he capitulated each time, his position in Pu Yao's eyes would fall, and his outcome would become even worse. Power was something that had to be fought for. This could not be avoided, he had to take a certain degree of risk. Facing Zuemo's stubborn silence, Pu Yao started to have a headache. To get a horse to run, you had to feed the horse. Zuemo, this guy who only had Jingshi in his eyes, and was becoming wiser. It was not possible to trick him like before. But the time he had. Thinking about that, Pu Yao's mood instantly became irritated. Looking at the person making trouble for him, he wanted to smash Zuemo into smithereens. But he suppressed the impulse in his heart. His temperament was not good, but he was not dumb. The scriptures of Yaoma, it is not strange that humans would have problems practicing it. The viciousness in Pu Yao's eyes gradually faded, and his tone resumed its habitual peace. However, I do have some Shouja scriptures in my possession. In the future, the rewards will be for these scriptures. You cannot blame me if there are side effects then. Zuemo was happy, but he still corrected, it's transactions. Transactions and rewards were two completely different concepts. A transaction meant that he was owed something, but if it was a reward then the meaning was different. Up to you. Pu Yao's face was unconcerned. Inside, his head hurt even more. Zuemo was becoming harder to deal with. However, you need to be quicker. Pu Yao's tone became extremely dissatisfied, the speed you make Jingshi is too slow. I need more Jingshi. I am a Zhuji cultivator. Zuemo had to emphasize reality. Pu Yao choked on Zuemo's words. He knew that Zuemo had been bothered by the fact his cultivation was not increasing. What Zuemo said was the truth. In the ranks of Zhuji Xiuzhi, there would not be many that could make more Jingshi than he did. This guy that was so enthusiastic about making Jingshi, but was also stubborn in his bones, Pu Yao didn't know what to do. If he switched to another person, truthfully, Pu Yao felt that they wouldn't be better than him. This guy was a natural at making Jingshi. Pu Yao found that Zuemo was extremely sensitive to everything related to him. Zuemo knew when to fight for himself but not enrage the other party, he knew when to compromise. He was a smart individual. Oh, even among the Yao, there were not many as smart as him. The potential that Zuemo had displayed was gradually changing Pu Yao's opinion. He suddenly remembered that a certain person had selected Zuemo from the beginning and his mood dropped like he had eaten a mosquito. Giving a cold snort, he disappeared. Zuemo was not puzzled by Pu Yao's sudden appearance and disappearance. Zuemo sighed in relief. It was extremely dangerous to negotiate with Pu Yao. The majority of the time, Pu Yao was normal, but his temperament was fickle. If Zuemo is not careful, his outcome would be very bad. Luckily, the result this time was pretty good. He was very satisfied. However, he temporarily did not need to consider the problem of making Jingshi, because he was penniless. And in front of him, there was still the last round of the sword test conference. He needed to get Kunluan's beginner formation Jade Scroll. Even though he had Su's guarantee, but Zuemo still didn't feel secure. There would be 100 competitors in the last round, and only 10 would pass. It could be seen just how cruel the competition was going to be. Su's power might be deep, and she would definitely have no problem protecting herself, but if she was protecting him as well, then it was hard to predict. It was safer to rely on himself. He had a general plan in his head. As he thought of this plan, he was full of excitement and expectancy. However, right now, he had to suppress the excitement inside and throw the plan to one side. There was an immediate problem he faced, recovering from his wounds. In the last match with Chowan, he had won even with a disadvantage, but he had received serious injuries. After his master's emergency healing, he had managed to recover greatly. Originally, Zuemo had planned to slowly recover, but who would have thought that the sect leader suddenly wanted him to attend the free-for-all round. Now with the Jade Scroll as an extra reason, he had to focus on the problem of healing. His cultivation was far lower than the competition. If his body was not healed, even if Su was helping, he would not manage to make it to the end. Of course, the most important part was healing didn't need him to cost any Jingshi. Fragrant ginger yard, Shifeng Rong had a cold expression as she stood in front of the medicinal tub. Zuemo's entire body was soaked in the medicinal fluid, only his head could be seen. The black medicinal fluid exuded a noxious odor. Sitting in the tub, Zuemo naturally received the brunt of it and became dizzy. Master, what's in here? Why does it smell so bad? Don't waste your words. Shifeng Rong said shortly, channel your Ling power. Whenever she saw Zuemo, her anger would well up and couldn't be suppressed. He had such talent, but didn't like cultivating the sword, and only concentrated on making Jingshi. How did she end up taking such a degenerate and greedy disciple? Zuemo heard the thick dissatisfaction in his master's voice and instantly became much more docile. In reality, he could feel the power in the tub of medicinal fluid. The thick and lively medicinal power was like countless little worms burrowing into his body. However, this process was not pleasant. Zuomo felt as though he was being pricked by countless needles. Hearing Master telling him to channel Ling power, he slightly paused. Should he start embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, or Vajra Profound Sutra? The thought circled through his head and he decided on Vajra Profound Sutra. The origins of the embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation technique was unclear. It wouldn't be good if his master detected it. He was not afraid of using Vajra Profound Sutra. Xin Yen Sherbua had given it to him. Even though the Vajra Profound Sutra he was practicing now was the gravestone version, the difference between the two was only the 5 phrases. Once he started Vajra Profound Sutra, Zuomo instantly felt it was different than usual. The countless tiny medicinal powers seemed to have been attracted by a magnet, turning into several dozen streams as they moved through the large meridians on Zuomo's body, and quickly entered the flow of Ling power moving in the channels. A short time later, Zuomo felt all the channels in his body were congested. He was frightened. He had never encountered a situation like this. Whoa! What medicinal fluid was this? It had such a strong power. Zuomo couldn't attend to anything else other than furiously using Vajra Profound Sutra, doing his best to spread the remaining medicinal power into the rest of his body. As the medicinal power spread through the body, it continuously healed Zuomo's wounds. It was like a large rainstorm, soaking the dry earth. His wounds greedily absorbed the medicinal power. Outside the tub, Shi Feng Rong had a concerned expression. Zuomo's entire face was dark gold, as though he was painted in gold. At some unknown time, Pei Yuan Ran, Xin Yen and Yen Le had appeared next to her. This boy is really strong. Yen Le said in shock, his body cultivation is this strong? Isn't this the golden flesh clothing? Xin Yen snorted coldly, he just doesn't like cultivating the sword. The expression of the others had become instantly ugly. If Zuomo's cultivation talent was average, they wouldn't feel this terrible, but he clearly was extremely talented at cultivation. Anything he practiced, he would progress at lightning speed. Even the Vajra Profound Sutra, that had been given to him carelessly, he could silently cultivate it to the step of golden flesh clothing. But he just had to be uninterested in cultivating the sect's sword. The numerous powerful sword scriptures of the sect were all open to him, but this guy, after going to look once in the beginning, he hasn't gone back. How could Pei Yuan Ran and the others feel good? I'm insisting in having him participate in the next round of the sword test conference. This is to let him understand the true power of sword shio. Even though Pei Yuan Ran was experienced in keeping his composure, he was extremely infuriated by Zuomo. I've already told Wei Xing to do his best at the conference. Humph, Zuomo needs to see what a sword shio is, and why sword shio are the strongest shoja in the world. Yes. The sect's disciple that is not interested in the sect's scriptures. If this fact got out, even if our ancestral masters knew, we would lose face. Yen Lu, who usually had a smile on his face, had a face full of anger. This cannot be tolerated. Xin Yan's face was full of murderous intent. Shi Feng Rong, who had been concerned before, said discontentedly, this guy needs to be taught. Zuomo's terrible conduct had caused the upper echelons of Wukong's sword sect to come to a consensus. Being focused on channeling Ling power, Zuomo paid attention to nothing else. He had no idea of what was being said in front of him. His entire consciousness, all the Ling power, they were completely concentrated on controlling the medicinal power. He didn't know what Ling Grass Master had added into the medicinal tub this time, but the medicinal power was domineering. He felt he was going to explode from the medicinal power flooding in. The speed he tamed the medicinal power was far slower than the speed he was absorbing it. He gritted his teeth. He knew if he could endure through this little while, he would receive great profit. He was very familiar with making medicine, he understood that the medicinal power contained in the Ling medicine was limited. As long as he could make it through, he could slowly absorb the medicinal power inside his body. As the medicinal power burrowed into his body, it quickly turned to gold dots of light and entered his flesh. Right now, his tendons and flesh were all gleaming with gold light. The dots of gold light embedded in his flesh became even more populous. But the rate that the gold light increased was far slower than the rate of increase in the medicinal power. What Suemo felt panicked about was that the medicinal power did not show any signs of slowing down, and was as still domineering as before. The medicinal power was like a flood, furiously flowing into his body. His channels were filled to the brim, but the medicinal power was still pouring into his body uncontrollably. His channels enlarged, the change obvious to the naked eye. What Suemo felt fear about was that he could not stop. The flowing Ling power and the medicinal power mixed together and was like a wild horse that went off its reins. It couldn't be stopped. Damn it. Chapter 133 Pei Yuan rants bad mood, he's actually making another breakthrough. Yen Lu gaped at Suemo sitting in the medicinal tub. Then he said to himself, tilting his head, why did I use another? No one minded him. Everyone's face was heavy as they looked at Suemo. The gold light on Suemo's gold face was even brighter. The light rippled in layers like waves. Starting from the roots, his hair started to turn gold. His body was slightly trembling, as though he was under great pain. The dissatisfaction on Shi Feng Rong's face flew away. What took over it was generous concern. What stage is after golden flesh clothing in Vajra Profound Sutra? Pei Yuan Ran asked. Xin Yen wielded his words like gold, red lotus flowing gold. Body cultivation, Pei Yuan Ran seemed to be recalling something. Which level can it naturally form abhina? Fifth. Xin Yen answered. So the fifth level. Pei Yuan Ran nodded, indicating he understood. With his speed, it won't be long before he reaches the fifth level. Yen Lu inserted. I'm very curious if this boy reaches the fifth level, what kind of abhina he will form. The others did not say anything. They were all unfamiliar with body cultivation. The entire realm of Kunlun was the dominion of Sword Xiu. Sword Xiu only cultivated the sword, and did not ask about anything else. Those skilled in body cultivation were the Dhyana, and the realm of Xian Kong was the holy ground of the Dhyanath. The Dhyana Xiu was another major kind of Shouja. Their main focus was on cultivating the body, emphasizing their sense of self. In terms of progression difficulty, the most difficult would probably be the Dhyana Xiu. However, the scriptures of the Dhyana were clear and simple, and was extremely easy for beginners to learn. As long as they had the perseverance, the majority would accomplish something. However, the trade-off was that even though it was easy in the beginning but it became harder to progress. The further along in cultivation one went, the harder it was to cultivate, and more perseverance and comprehension was required to achieve greater things. But to be able to cultivate to the fourth level as fast as Suemo did, that kind of talent was very rare. What made people most wary about the Dhyana were the abhina. The abhina were abilities that naturally formed after one cultivated to a certain level. Other Shio admired and envied this attribute very much. As long as the level was reached, they would always receive an abhina. However, this abhina would differ between people. Some had tried to find patterns in the abhina, but up until now, no one had managed to predict the mechanisms. But even if Suemo could cultivate to the fifth level of Vajra Profound Sutra, and form an abhina, Pei Yuan Ran and the others wouldn't be happy. They were Sword Xiu. If the Dhyana could be described as peaceful, then Sword Xiu were mostly haughty and Puritan. They only believed in their sword. As the Shouja who had the greatest attack power, the Sword Xiu did have the capital to be proud. The bigger and more known sects, the clearly this attribute could be seen. Wukong's sword sect might only be a little minor sect right now, but the ancestral master had been renowned. There was still quite a difference compared to the normal minor sections. Pei Yuan Ran and the others didn't even put any importance on other sects. How could they not look down at any cultivation method other than cultivating the sword? The more Suemo achieved in body cultivation, the worse they felt. The black medicinal fluid gradually became clear. Suemo gradually stopped trembling, his dark golden face now seemed more solid. Before, it had seemed like there had been a layer of dark gold plated onto his face, but now, it was like his face was made out of dark gold. It was still that expressionless face, but there was now an unspeakable dignity. Pei Yuan ran and the others' expressions became even uglier. If it wasn't that Zhuo Mo's talent was exceptional, and he was also the sect's disciple, they would have already kicked him off the mountain. Zhuo Mo opened his eyes and saw the 4 elders standing in a row in front of him, their eyes unfriendly as they looked at him. The joy from breaking through to the 4 level of Vajra Profound Sutra was still in his chest, but the ugly expressions of the 4 elders pulled him back to reality. He didn't know how he had enraged the sect leader and the others, but he knew he shouldn't pour oil into the fire. The less said, the less the wrong. If he didn't say anything, he could not commit any wrongs. He perceptively closed his mouth. Arlite, your wounds have pretty much healed. For you, your master had spent a lot of effort. You need to perform well, and not fail the expectations your master has of you. This sword test conference, if you do not enter the top 10, you can go to your second Shirbua to be punished. The sect leader humphed and threw down the sentence before striding off. Second Shirbua, punishment. Zhuo Mo's gaze couldn't help but turn to second Shirbua. Seeing the cold light flickering in second Shirbua's eyes, even though he was in the boiling hot medicinal water, he felt as though he was freezing. Even Master and Yen Lu Shirbua left without a word. Zhuo Mo didn't understand what had happened. But no matter how much he thought, he could not figure out what had happened. He quickly pushed the question to one side because he suddenly remembered the last words the sect leader had left. The top 10. Was the sect leader drunk? Or had he heard it wrong? Zhuo Mo sat dazedly in the tub, unable to react for a long time. Dong Fu, the night was coming. The multicolored light of the lantern seemed to fill every corner of Dong Fu. The Dong Fu that had become prosperous like it never had before due to the sword test conference had not calmed down as the night came. It was still lively as ever. The cries and slogans mixed together. The light of swords and talismans flew above the sky, and the howls of some ling beasts passed into the ears of those near. Why has Sir stopped me? A plainly dressed Xiuzha asked sternly of a white-clothed male in front of him. The white-clothed male faintly responded, "You are not Wei Ping." It was the Lin Qian that Zhuo Mo had encountered at the 100 Treasures Flying Pavilion. This Xiuzha suddenly smiled, "Sir really is funny. Who am I if not Wei Ping? You have to ask my sword." Lin Qian lightly sighed. Wei Ping's expression changed dramatically, revealing a viciousness. A faint purple elemental smoke appeared on his hands suddenly which shot towards Lin Qian. A streak of sword light. The sharp sword light moved like it did not encounter any resistance, easily cutting the light purple elemental smoke in half and headed for Wei Ping. Arg! Wei Ping's eyes widened angrily, given an inhuman howl. His body suddenly expanded in size. Pew! The sword light suddenly accelerated. Wei Ping's eyes bulged and then the howls suddenly stopped. On his chest, there was a small hole. What was weird was that not a drop of blood had flowed out. The 10th one. Lin Qian said lightly, his gaze full of worry. A residence in Dongfu. Old Luo is dead. Have we found who did it? Same as before, killed by a single sword stroke. It should be the same person. Someone has locked onto us. That's not strange. The noise from the stars in daytime was too large, it could not be concealed. Have our affairs made any progress? Nothing. If it really is a certain personage, they would certainly be thinking of ways to contact us. Could it be? Don't think nonsense. The stars in daytime cannot be faked. Even though I do not know what the personage is thinking, but we need to fulfill our duty. Yes. Continue to pay attention. You guys need to carefully conceal yourself. Only you few have been able to sneak in. It will take a few months until the next group will arrive. Right now, the situation in Bloody Sky Metropolis Jia is shifting. We need to find this personage quickly. Yes. In a little store, Mo was in discussion with Su. Since Su was promising that he could enter the top 10, it would really be disadvantageous for himself if he didn't use it. But when they entered the Great Pine Pavilion, their starting position would be random. No one knew where they would end up. This information had been provided to Mo by Su. It was very clear that she felt that, as long as she gave Mo enough information, Mo would be able to find a way to resolve this. The match between Mo and Chowan had fully proven his abilities in this area. Mo went over all the questions about the Great Pine Pavilion in great detail. Because he had not been concerned with the sword test conference in the beginning, he didn't even have the most basic information, and he was very attentive. It had to be said that Mo was a very practical person. Once he was certain that he needed to fight for victory, he would think of all the possible ways. It is very simple to communicate. We only need to make 2 paper cranes, one for each of use. We can carve a yin and yang guiding formation on the paper for the crane, and that will allow us to quickly find each other's position. Mo said shamelessly, once we enter, I will stay at my position. You need to find me with the quickest possible speed. Alight. Su did not hesitate at all, nodding in agreement. However, she was still struck by Mo's shamelessness. Normal men, including her Shixiang Gu Rongping, were full of the desire to perform in front of her. But Mo, he was completely shameless in doing nothing, and he didn't show any unnaturalness when doing it. After the two finalized the details of communication, Mo left. Right after Mo left, Gu Rongping walked out from the back. Even if you help him, he can't enter the top 10. Gu Rongping said with certainty. You want to be enemies with me? Su said icily. How could I? Gu Rongping said with a smile. He gave a light laugh. This sword test conference, the young experts of all of Sky Moon Jia is gathered here. He might be talented, but he does not have enough power. So what? Su's voice was still cold. However, she did know she was being stubborn. She also knew that Shixiang was waiting for her to beg him. She stayed silent. Gu Rongping glanced at her before standing and leaving. Even with Su's help, Mo was certain his chances of entering the top 10 were still minuscule. He was the weakest person of the competitors entering the Great Pine Pavilion. Any competitor that saw him was not going to be nice. He was like the fat little sheep that entered crossed paths with pride of the lions. However, when he thought about his plan, Mo was full of anticipation. Wukong Mountain. Did you hear? The sect leader ordered Shixiang to enter the top 10. Otherwise, he needs to go Xian Yen Shu to get punished. Heavens! Xian Yen Shu. Is the sect leader finding Shixiang an eyesore recently? It would be better if he sent a direct punishment. Right. That is too unrealistic. Oh, offending the sect leader. Shixiang will not have good days. When Xiaoguo heard the gossip, it was as though something was blocked inside her heart. It had been quite a few days since she had seen Shixiang. Ever since Shixiang came back from the outside last time, he had shut himself in the valley and hadn't come out since. A hint of worry flashed through her eyes. What she was worried about was not that Shixiang would be punished. She was an inner sect disciple and clearly understood to the position that Shixiang had with the sect leader. The punishment would not be major. What she was worried about was the Shixiang would risk his life for this. She knew that Shixiang looked as though he only cared about making Jingshi, but if he really wanted to do something, he would put in all his effort. A serious Shixiang was very scary, but if he was injured due to it. Xiaoguo bit her lips. Chapter 134. Before the battle. After 2 rounds of competition, with the exception of Mo, all the remaining participants were crowd favorites and were highly ranked in the power rankings. The experts that everyone favored all easily defeated the competition. Those matches might have been good, but they didn't excite the audience. Everyone's focus was on the last round of competition, the free-for-all round. Of 100 shoujo, only 10 would win. There were no rules, or protocols. The Great Pine Pavilion would become a frenzied battlefield. Only 10 would luckily survive. The fierceness could be predicted, the powerful encounters could not be avoided, and there were many environmental factors that could be used. How could people not look forward to this competition? A few days before the final round, Elder Tian Songzi announced that he was going to set up a mirage illusion formation around the Great Ping Pavilion. When it was time, all the battles inside the Great Pine Pavilion would be viewed in front of everyone like a mirage. Once this was announced, all of Dongfu shook. A no-rules battle previously had only been the concern of the gamblers because many people couldn't view it. The most spectacular battle was not interesting if people could not see it, but Tian Songzi's action quickly attracted every shoujo's attention. The news was broadcast through the sound tablet, and the news quickly spread. Dongfu suddenly became the center of the entire Sky Moon Jie. Countless shoujo, regardless of cultivation level, traveled day and night, forming lines, as they gathered in Dongfu. This was where the strongest youths of Sky Moon were fighting. This was the gathering place of the greatest geniuses of Sky Moon Jie. This would have Sky Moon Jie's grandest spells. This would show Sky Moon Jie's most cruel and fierce combat. Such a grand event, how could they miss it? It was such a rare chance to personally see it. Dongfu was busier and more prosperous than it ever had been before. All the large sects sent their disciples to spectate. They might not have the chance to enter the sword test conference, but it was very beneficial to view the battles and observe how the best of their generation wielded spells. When shoujo faced their enemies, they usually hid everything. To be able to examine and see it in real life, no one wanted to miss the opportunity. The illusory jade scroll of Zuomo's match with Chowan was now priced at 100 pieces of third-grade jingshi. The market had sold out. Many people regretted that they hadn't made some more illusory jade scrolls at the time. They would have gotten rich. The illusory jade scrolls of the match had mostly been bought by the larger sections. They were planning to give the jade scrolls to their disciples that were skilled in formations. It had to be said that the larger sects were much more sensible. While the number of illusory scrolls of the following matches were more plentiful, the demand could not be compared to Zuomo's match. The little Dongfu was filled with all kinds of shoujo. Many shoujo saw the opportunity and started to do business. Some put out the talismans and materials they did not need to exchange or sell. Some started a business of buying low and selling high. Dongfu had overnight become the biggest and most prosperous market in Sky Moon Jie. Wukong Hall, Wei Sheng and the sect leader sat across from each other. "How is it?" The sect leader said with a small smile, "You didn't meet a strong opponent for your first 2 matches, are you disappointed? You must be looking forward to the next round very much." "This disciple is looking forward to it." Wei Sheng said honestly, he was unable to hide the excitement in his eyes. "To be able to fight with so many experts, it really makes my blood boil." The sect leader nodded in praise. In the eyes of the elders of Wukong Sword Sect, Wei Sheng had almost all the good attributes that a sword show should have. His personality was steady and determined, he worked hard at his cultivation, and his mind and heart were pure. He was completely dedicated towards the sword. Almost no one could compare to his talent with the sword. Facing this battle, Wei Sheng was full of the desire for battle, not afraid in the least. He did not hide from anything, and did not panic at obstacles. Thinking about talent, Pei Yuan Ran couldn't help but think of Zuomo. In all the disciples of the sect, the only person that could match Wei Sheng in talent would probably only be Zuomo. But when he thought of this problematic youth, his brow unconsciously furrowed. Detecting his master's vexation, Wei Sheng couldn't help but ask in curiosity, "Has master encountered something?" Even though in the elders of the sect, the one with the deepest cultivation had to be Xian Yen Shishu, but master's power was also incomprehensibly deep. Wei Sheng's cultivation was far stronger than before. Whenever he felt the strong presence that master occasionally exuded, he felt afraid. Something that even Master found difficult. What could that be? Noticing his loss of composure, Pei Yuanran waved his hand. Nothing. Afterwards, he deliberated and softly said, that boy, Zuemo, he must be cursing me inside. I sent a death order demanding he enter the top 10. He suddenly thought of something, and said teasingly, I heard that there are many people in Dongfu right now. Ing Feng hasn't been able to rest at all. All the inventory in the shop has been sold out. If the boy knew that he missed such a good opportunity to make Jingshi, he would probably spit blood. Hearing Master's light teasing, Wei Xing relaxed. When he thought about his Shidi's obsession with money, he laughed. This disciple feels the latter is a heavier blow to Shidi. Ha! Thinking about the problem that Zuemo had given him recently, now that he got one over the boy, Pei Yuanran felt extremely good. You're Shidi, he might have good talent, but his personality is too lazy. If he landed in Jingshi, he will not come out and he has no interest in cultivating the sword. Shidi will definitely understand the efforts of Master and the Shishu. Wei Xing said. He was helpless against his Shidi as well. He knew that Zuomo's personality was so, and he could not force it. Your Xian Yen Shibua has prepared an entire regimen of punishment and is just waiting for the boy to come. Thinking about it, Pei Yuanran couldn't help but be slightly smug. Based on cultivation, Zuemo could not enter the top 10 no matter what he did. However, in this world, strength was not everything, and Wei Xing knew very well that this Shidi of his was cunning and would have many tricks up his sleeve. He understood Shidi better than his master and the others. Shidi might seem lazy on the surface, but he was abnormally stubborn in his bones, which bordered on insanity. The other people only saw Shidi's talent, but only he suspected the amount of effort Shidi's little art of cloud and rain had required to reach the 4th level. The practice of any spell was not just possible with talent. However, this was only his gut instinct. If he said so to Master, there was no proof and it would not be effective. He was also curious how his Shidi, when forced into the corner, would react. From the fact that Shidi had been in seclusion since Wei Xing came back, he knew that Shidi was serious. Shidi was like a slack and loose spring. The more he was compressed, the stronger the explosive power. A serious Shidi could not be underestimated. Suddenly, he felt another kind of expectation towards the upcoming sword test conference. Noticing the anticipation in Wei Xing's eyes, Pei Yuanran mistakenly assumed Wei Xing was thinking of the sword test conference. Thinking about the things he and his Shidi had done when young, he started to reminisce. He refocused, and asked gravely, who do you plan to find to be your opponent? Hearing this, light flashed through Wei Xing's eyes. He unconsciously sat straighter, heavily stating 3 words. Gu Rong Ping. The Little West Wind Yard. Zuomo's hair was a mess as he sat on the ground, his eyes bloodshot as they stared fixedly in front of him. Not right, still not right, his mouth unconsciously muttered to himself. Materials were scattered as they laid before him, yet those materials seemed to have an unspeakable magnetism, attracting his gaze. Under the tangle of hair, that pair of bloodshot eyes flashed with a nimble light. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. Luoli sat on the mountain peak, looking at the bright moon as his thoughts wandered. Shidi, you are still angry at me? Hao Min bit her lips and said pitifully. Luoli did not turn his head, saying lightly, Shiji exaggerates. My heart only has the sword, no anger. Hao Min's breathing stopped. She didn't know what to say. After Luoli had been wounded by Zuemo, she had not even visited once. But who could know that Luoli had seemed to be reborn, fighting his way into the last round of the sword test conference. The entire Wukong sword sect was looking at him again. Hao Min had been reminded of his good qualities from the past, and wanted to get together again, but Luoli looked at her like he was looking at a stranger. Shidi truly does not care about our past feelings? Hao Min made a last effort. There had been no feelings before. Luoli's answer was straightforward and crisp without any disguise, it's late. Shiji, please return. Hearing Hao Min cry as she left, under the moonlight, Luoli started to practice the sword. Under the moonlight, the sword light seemed to contain a faint sorrow. Dongfu Hall, Tian Songzi looked at his beloved disciple, slight comfort and satisfaction in his eyes. He said warmly, "The rank is not important, it is intangible. What is most important is comprehension, of fighting with different people, of facing different spells, of ambushes, and of melee fighting. You will encounter them in the future, and also in this competition." "Yes." Yu Bai respectfully answered with his head down. "Do you have a potential opponent?" Tian Songzi asked. "This disciple wants to spar with Zhongming Yan." Tian Songzi suddenly furrowed his brows, and said irritably in a deep voice, "This is not a spar, it is a fight, it is a battle." He didn't know why his master was suddenly so angry. Yu Bai said slightly fearful, "Yes." Tian Songzi waved his hand. "Go, prepare well. Zhongming Yan could receive Zhua Mei Tian's true teachings, he will not be weak." "Yes." Yu Bai hesitated before leaving. Looking at his most loved disciple, Tian Songzi suddenly sighed silently, a deep worry floating up in his eyes. Lingying sect. The sect leader looked at Changheng standing in front of him. He was slightly irritated. Changheng's temper was rebellious. Looking at him carelessly standing, without any of the required respect, the dislike in the sect leader's heart became stronger. Changheng might be the most outstanding of the Lingying sect disciples, but he was never liked by the elders. "Humph, Changheng, if you meet Wukong Sword Sect's Sui Mo this time, do not let him go." The sect leader said hatefully, "This boy has embarrassed the sect many times, you cannot release him." Changheng was not affected. His eyes were half-lidded. He actually was sleeping in the hall. Seeing Changheng act like this, the sect leader was even angrier. He raised his volume, "Changheng. Have you heard me?" Changheng slowly opened his eyes. He glanced at the sect leader, throwing down, "Nag. I'll fight whoever I encounter, there's no trouble." Finishing, he didn't care about the petrified disciples and the exploding sect leader, freely leaving. Chapter 135, Great Pine Pavilion. Dongfu Hall was the residence that the Dongfu Xianren had left behind. It was the most complete and best residence in Dongfu. Other than the dense Ling energy, there were many marvelous features to the residence itself, like the Great Pine Pavilion. The Great Pine Pavilion was similar to Wukong Sword Sect's Sword Cave, it was a whole other world. When compared to the tightly held secret of Wukong Sword Sect's Sword Cave, Dongfu Hall's Great Pine Pavilion was famous. The world inside the Great Pine Pavilion was high and steep, full of mountainous peaks. The area was extremely large. Ling beasts were raised by the master of Dongfu, and it had been this way in every generation. Most of these were vicious and wild beasts. The disciples of each generation, after they reached Ningmai, would be allowed to gain experience in the Great Pine Pavilion. This was why in all the casinos, the wagering favored Yu Bai so much. While other people the Great Pine Pavilion was unfamiliar, to Yu Bai it was his backyard. A secret paradise talisman like the Great Pine Pavilion needed great power to create. Almost all large sects that had some foundation, when their founders created the sect they would spend great amounts of power to create a secret world to become the base of their sect. Inside the Great Pine Pavilion, any battles by Xiuzha under Jindan's stage, no matter how they fought, there would cause no damage. Of course, the Ling beasts that were being raised there were not immune. In all of Dongfu, only Dongfu Hall and Wukong Sword Sect had a secret paradise talisman, but almost none knew about the Sword Cave of Wukong Sword Sect. The elders and sect leaders of the other sects could only stare with jealous eyes as Tian Songzi opened the Great Pine Pavilion. Among them, the sect leader of Lingying sect was especially jealous. This was an indicator of how deep a sect's foundation was. No matter how wealthy Lingying sect was currently, in the eyes of those slightly high-level Xiuzha, they were just a nouveau riche sect. A secret paradise talisman was not something that could be bought with Jingshi. Other than the great power it took to create the talisman, it cost a large price. Other than making them for their own sects, no one would ever make a secret paradise talisman to sell. Pei Yuan ran and the others were very calm. The secrets of Wukong Sword sect's Sword Cave was comparable or even better than Great Pine Pavilion. Even when they themselves discussed the Sword Cave, they would sigh at the great power of the ancestral founder. The four of them may be in the stage of Jin Dan and rank among the top experts of Sky Moon Jia, but they did not have the power to make a secret paradise talisman. The 100 competitors attending the last round stood there silently, but curiosity came onto many of their faces. Many of them had never entered a secret paradise talisman before, and were extremely curious. The disciples of larger sects, like Gu Rongping, either had a calm face or were looking arrogantly at the other people, feeling superior to the others. Around the Great Pine Pavilion, the mirage illusion formation, slowly activated, the 7-colored lights swimming around like countless fishes flying. Slowly, above the Great Pine Pavilion, a faint image appeared. The image quickly grew larger and became clear until it covered all of the sky above Dongfu. Presented in front of everyone was a serene and peaceful world. Row after row of mountain peaks with steep slopes that were so elegant as though they were drawn. Between the mountains, ling beasts could be seen moving. Such a clear and gigantic illusion, it was very rare to see. Many people sighed in amazement. The Xiuzhe who had come from long off were celebrating that they had made the journey. It was very rare to see such a spectacular event. No matter if the people were floating in the sky or on the ground, they could easily see this gigantic mirage. At this time, Dongfu formed an extremely strange spectacle. Countless Xiuzhe had packed in the sky, low and high, some flying around as they adjusted their angle, and sigh with wonder. On the ground, people took out recliners, some crouched on the rooftops, as they raised their heads to look at the enormous mirage in the sky. They were all Xiuzhe. Tens of thousands of Xiuzhe were gathered in Dongfu. Looking from a distance, they appeared to be packed densely like ants. Such a grand picture. A non-local elder of a sect couldn't help but praise, spectacular. Tian Songzi really has the breadth of spirit, no wonder he is the master of Dongfu. An elder beside him said, such a grand event. If this was held every few years, it would be a beneficial matter. That's hard. The number of sects in Sky Moon Jia that have a secret paradise talisman can be counted on the hands. Even if they had one, who would be like Tian Songzi and bear to let it be used for a competition? Exactly. Who doesn't hide the secret paradise as deep as they can? It really is the first time someone has acted this way. I wonder what he is thinking. I've seen Tian Songzi before. He's not stupid. He definitely has his own thoughts. As they discussed, the topic of the elders' discussion veered off topic. Who do you feel is going to win? One of the elders suddenly asked. Gu Rongping. Gu Rongping. Naturally, it is Gu Rongping. Heart Lake sect has deep foundations and is one of the top sects in Sky Moon Jie. Gu Rongping is one of those genius seen every 100 years. It would be hard to find someone that could be comparable to him. Everyone was in consensus on this point. Other than Gu Rongping. An elder who rarely spoke suddenly opened. That Su is very mysterious and pretty powerful. Gu Feng's, little ghost sword, is extremely experienced. I favor him. Wei Xing's 2 battles were clean and quick. But I haven't heard of this Wukong sword sect. It's probably a small sect. An elder said hesitantly. Speaking of this Wukong sword sect, it should not be underestimated. The 3 disciples it has attending the competition all entered the last round. Hearing this, the elder who was favoring Su sneered, we shouldn't even speak of this matter. That guy that looks like a zombie had a bye to get into the last round. We can only say this Wukong sword sect is on pretty good terms with Tian Songzi. Another elder instantly objected, even though this guy's cultivation is a bit low, but he's still skilled. The elder that favored Su asked in response, do you favor him? Not possible. The elder shook his head. The gap between the stages of Ningmai and Zhuji is too large. There is also Chowan as the precedent. When his opponents see him, they would not be light on their guard. He's just a Zhuji, how many skills can he have? He probably has used up most of them. His elders must be wanting him to get some experience. Does someone favor him? The elder that favored Su asked the other people. Ha ha. If someone favors him, then I would really admire the person. Haha, the crowd of elders discussed interestedly. The ones of the same sect would communicate and see if there were suitable seedlings. Between the Shouja, Zhuo turned his head around and looked. Even though his zombie face was expressionless, but curiosity flashed in his eyes. Privately, he was conversing with Pu Yao. Pu, if you compare this great pine pavilion to the sword cave, which one is better? All trash. Pu Yao's voice was full of disdain. Zhuo instantly was speechless and rolled his eyes. With the same tone, he shot back, aren't you a Sky Yao? Can you make one? Pu Yao did not know shame. I play with things that should not be played with. This is not interesting. Zhuo finally knew why he was only a Zhuji Shouja and Pu Yao was a Sky Yao. This was a direct ratio to the thickness of the face. He suddenly noticed that Gu Rongping seemed to have swept a look in his direction. Even though Gu Rongping had disguised it well, but Zhuo sensitively caught the strange emotions contained in that look. No way. Such a little person as him was not worthy of Gu Rongping's interest. It must have been that he sensed it wrong. Careful. Pu Yao suddenly said heavily. Zhuo paused. What is it? Just now, someone used a detection spell. Detection spell? Zhuo was dumb, and then said in shock. No way. He was preparing to look around when Pu Yao immediately shouted, don't look. Zhuo instantly didn't dare to move, obediently standing on his spot. He rarely saw Pu Yao this nervous, as though he was facing a great enemy. Someone had used a detection spell. He deliberately pretended to casually sweep across the surroundings. No one seemed to be behaving strangely. Even Gu Rongping didn't seem to detect that someone had just used a detection spell. Zhuo was shocked. To be able to use a detection spell on this many people, but no one had discovered it, the caster's cultivation must be terrifying. Humph, it seems someone is targeting me. Pu Yao snorted coldly, but there was no fear in his words. How do you know it is to catch you? Zhuo reflexively followed up. Isn't it just the fire eye? I've encountered it a few times before. Pu Yao's tone turned colder, filled with dislike. It's just as bothersome as the Diana's sky eye, Abhina. Hearing such hate-filled words, then thinking of Pu Yao's tendency to want to get even, Zhuo didn't even need to think to know that Pu Yao had definitely suffered before due to this spell. He instantly became nervous. Has the other found you? Hearing this, Pu Yao instantly became smug. He snickered, that person would never think that I am in your sea of consciousness. This fire eye might be powerful, but it can only detect the energy of Yama. Don't worry, as long as you act normal, the other would never think of it. That's good. Zhuo's heart landed. Just at this time, Tian Songzi stood up. All the eyes gathered on his body. Tian Songzi was very good at keeping his composure. He didn't seem to notice as he said calmly, prepare now. I will now send you into the Great Pine Pavilion. Finishing, he started to cast a spell. His legs stood steadily, Ling power spraying out of his lightly moving palms. Everyone suddenly found the average-looking figure of Tian Songzi suddenly became towering figure, like a millennia-old pine tree, weathered yet strong. His legs seemed to reach deep into the ground like countless roots, steady as a rock, unmoved by wind or rain. The rippling pressure almost covered all of Dongfu. Other than the Jindan Shouja that were calm, the Shouja under the stage of Jindan, even Gu Rongping who really conducted himself elegantly, changed expression. Yu Bai looked with a hot expression at Master, his heart filled with pride. Wei Xing seemed to be affected. There was no retreat on his face. He raised his head, the light in his eyes bursting, the two hands by his side unconsciously turning to fists. Wow, such a powerful old man. Zhuo gaped inside. But comparing Tian Songzi and Second Shirbua, he still felt that Second Shirbua was more scary. Ho! Tian Songzi bellowed. Countless lights rose up under the feet of the 100 Shouja. The light flashed, and they disappeared. Chapter 136, Heart-Turned Sword Essence. Zhuo felt his vision blur, a strong feeling of dizziness making him almost unable to keep upright. A gust of cold wind blew into his face. He quickly refocused. Of course, he couldn't help but complain inside that the comfort of Tian Songzi's transportation spell was lacking compared to Pu Yao's transportation formation. He glanced at the surroundings. What entered his eyes were all old trees. Occasionally, the wind would blow past, and he could smell water. There was a source of water nearby. Zhuo's mind became alert. The power of water was strong near water sources. It was extremely useful for him. After Zhuo cast a hiding spell, he carefully walked in the direction of water. The spells in the Jade Scrolls of Elder Wei Nan proved to be useful. Like this spell that concealed his figure, it was very effective. If Ningmai Shouja didn't pay close attention, they would have a difficult time detecting him. In all of the 5 element spells, Zhuo's skill was the best with the little art of cloud and rain, and he was most sensitive to the power of water. After walking about 50 paces, he found the source of water. A water pond about half a mu large with weeds growing along the edges. The excrement of ling beasts could be seen everywhere. Zhuo carefully inspected the surroundings. He was very satisfied. It seemed that his luck had been very good this time. But he still warily scanned the surroundings with his consciousness. He didn't put out the paper crane immediately to report his location to Su. Strong warrior protect master. The figure of a golden giant started to appear behind Zhuo. The golden shadow quickly became tangible. A gigantic soldier wearing golden armor stood proudly. Only now did Zhuo release a breath. With this seal soldier, his safety could be guaranteed to a certain degree. It was usually Ningmai that used seal soldiers. Only those Shouja that were very wealthy, like the Wang Shixiang of Lingying sect, would be able to use seal soldiers when they were only in the stage of Zhuji. Actually, this seal soldier had been given to Wang Shixiang by his family to use when his life was in danger. It was just that he had been threatened by Zhuo and he had panicked, using this seal soldier. He had not won, and even paid up the seal soldier to Zhuo. Zhuo's eyes glowed as they looked at the dignified armored seal soldier. His heart was full of regret. It was a pity that after being used this time, this seal soldier would be useless. In Dongfu, compared to those that made dan, or forged, the Shouja that understood seals were even more rare. There wasn't even one person that had the power to create seals as powerful as this seal soldier. He didn't know where Wang Shixiang's elders had bought this seal soldier. With the protection of the seal soldier, his confidence rose. However, he still did not release the paper crane in his possession. He thought about the plan that he had spent so much effort on. On the wooden and frozen face, pride flashed through his eyes. This last round was a free-for-all round. There were no rules. The last 10 Shouja that were remaining in the Great Pine Pavilion were the last winners. Zhuo decided to utilize this rule to the fullest. It was a pity that his concealment spells were not outstanding. Otherwise, he could just find a place and conceal his presence. That way, his chances of winning would be greater. He could think of this, and other people also would. He suddenly thought about the fire eyes that Pu Yao mentioned today. If someone really knew fire eyes, it was useless to hide. Hugh, all of you definitely don't know what GE is planning. Zhuo was full of motivation. In the sky above Dongfu, the gigantic mirage clearly showed every change inside the Great Ping Pavilion. Seeing the competitors appear on the mirage, the spectators instantly became alert, and praised the wonders of the mirage illusion formation. Those that were watching in groups fixed their eyes on the mirage as they discussed. Who do you think will get first? Yan Mingzi asked. Hu Shan shook his head. I don't know. Maybe Gu Rongping. He's just too powerful. Tao Zhuer suddenly pointed to the most prominent main peak in the mountain range depicted in the mirage, shouting, Look! At the same time, many Xiuzhe found 2 people on the main peak. The discussion was like the retreating tide, quickly disappearing. Everyone's eyes gathered onto the main peak. There were 15 great peaks that touched the clouds in the Great Pine Pavilion, and among them, the central main peak was the most prominent. It was extremely steep, like a gigantic sword cleaving the clouds. On the main peak, 2 people were standing. Gu Rongping and Wei Sheng. The person who was predicted to win first in this sword test conference, Gu Rongping. The person who had an apparition when he entered Juji, Wei Sheng. No one had thought that those 2 people would appear at the same position. The competition had just started, and it had entered a peak. It was out of everyone's expectations. At the same time, many of the competitors inside the Great Pine Pavilion noticed the 2 people on the main peak. The 2 of them were like 2 swords, without any disguise or concealment as they stood proudly. Many people couldn't help but release a breath. Those 2 were opponents none of them wanted to meet. Through the black gauze, Su gazed at Gu Rongping standing on the peak. Her heart relaxed slightly. What she had been most worried about was that Xixiang would encounter Zhua Mo. Xixiang definitely wouldn't give Zhua Mo a chance and show any mercy. Because she hadn't begged him. But that guy, why hadn't he sent out the paper crane? She suddenly turned her body. On the main peak, the wind was very strong. Didn't think that I would encounter Brother Wei so soon. It really is a surprise to me. Gu Rongping said with a smile. Wei Sheng's expression was solemn. He did not speak, the desire for battle rising in his eyes. At some time, splitting rainbow sword had appeared in his hands. The air around his body seemed to have been pushed by an invisible hand, slowly spinning around him. A traceless yet pressuring presence, with him at the center, rippled out. The smile on Gu Rongping's face disappeared. His eyes could see Wei Sheng in front of him, but in his spiritual perception, where Wei Sheng was standing, there was not a person. It was an empty space, but there was sword essence. The Xiuzhe in Dong Fu conversed, their faces puzzled. What they were seeing was out of their comprehension, yet among the sect leaders and elders of the various sects, it exploded. Who told me Wukong's sword sect is a small sect? Wei Sheng's sword scripture definitely is above 5th grade. Heart turn sword essence. The next step would be metamorphosis. Heavens! What kind of monster is Wei Sheng? How old is he? Wukong's sword sect is going to rise. This boy's future is limitless. Impossible. Impossible. How is it possible? I heard when this boy was entering Juji, an apparition of sword energy had appeared. I had thought it was just a rumor, but seeing him now, it's probably the truth. The faces of Pei Yuan Ran and the other 3 were filled with pride and happiness. Ever since they discovered Wei Sheng's talent, they had put large amounts of effort into him. Almost all the resources of the sect had been given to him. Xin Yan had taught him step by step. For the first time, the sword cave had been opened for a disciple. Even the Ling food and Ling Dan that was put into the sword cave when Wei Sheng had been fighting in the sword cave had been made at the expense of countless expensive materials. Otherwise, no matter how outstanding Wei Sheng's talent was, he couldn't have broken through to Ningmai so quickly. Seeing the shock that Wei Sheng gave others, the 4 exchanged smiles. Their hearts were full of the feeling of accomplishment. Wukong's sword sect previously did not have any outstanding disciples. That had been a burden on all of their hearts. It was only when Wei Sheng had appeared that everything had changed. If people knew how short of a time it took Wei Sheng to go from Juji to Ningmai, they would be frightened out of their wits. A slight hint of mirth floated on the corner of Pei Yuanran's mouth. Sometimes, he would also be frightened by Wei Xing's cultivation speed. Heart-turned sword essence, it was comprehending a deeper level of sword essence. Upon reaching this stage, the Xiuzhe could control the sword essence according to his heart and wishes. Controlling the sword scripture and controlling the sword essence were two completely different concepts. The former could affect the power of the sword essence, the strength of the attack. It required delicate control of Ling power, and the finer it was, the great the power of the sword scripture. But after one could control a sword scripture perfectly, if they wanted to progress further, they had to reach heart-turned sword essence. Each sword scripture, at the beginning, it was based on the law that Xiuzhe that created it had. For those who came after and learned the scripture, these were different laws. Reaching heart-turned sword essence, that meant that Wei Xing had started to comprehend deeper levels of law. Only by comprehending his own law could he break through the layers of restrictions in the sword scripture. When one reached the metamorphosis sword essence, it was creating one's own law that belonged to the individual. This was why when the same sword scripture was practiced by different people to higher levels, it would differ so much. Normally, the people who could touch this level were Xiuzhe entering Jindan. Wei Xing was a Ningmai Xiuzhe and had already started to comprehend law. Such talent, it was terrifying. Wei Xing has progressed so fast, it really is the good fortune of the sect. So young and having reached the level of heart-turned sword essence, even second Shidi hadn't done the same at that age. Pei Yuanran praised. The four were tired of sitting and fighting with the other sect leaders, so the four took the inner sect disciples to one side to watch the competition. Li Yingfeng saw the agreement on second Shirbu's face, and couldn't help but jump in to say, "Master, so this means that eldest Shixiang is going to win?" Yan Lu shook his head. "Not certain. Isn't Shixiang on a higher level?" Li Yingfeng was puzzled. Yan Lu explained, heart-turned sword essence is a transition level and a very unstable level. The old restrictions have not been completely broken, and the new sword scripture has not formed. The advantage provided in battle is not always evident. If the heart is uncertain, the power of the sword scripture would actually decrease. The disciples of Wukong's sword sect all had ugly expressions. Even Pei Yuanran and the others had left the joy of the previous moment, their expressions serious as they stared at the mirage. Zuo Mo's cultivation was a pitiful Zhuji stage. His eyes naturally couldn't compare to those Ningmai Xiuzhe, and was unable to notice Wei Xing Shixiang's battle. Everything had been thrown far into the back of his mind. With the protection of the seal soldier, he could put all of his attention onto his plan. He started to furiously take things out of the dimensional ring. In the blink of an eye, a small mountain piled up in front of him. A small mountain completely made up of various materials. Seeing this pile of materials bought with his pile of Jingshi, Zuo Mo's heart ached with pain. I'll get all of you to taste the power of Jingshi. It was a pity that everyone's eyes at this time were gathered on Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping as they faced off on the main peak. No one noticed, beside a nondescript pond, a certain zombie was like a laboring ant, slowly moving a mountain made up of materials. Chapter 137, Each person's opponent. Su coldly stared at the thin male in front of her. She recognized him. Gue Feng, he had unknown origins, skilled in the little ghost sword, and he had a mysterious ghost concealment movement method. He was a popular contender of this year's Dong Fu sword test conference. Gue Feng was dressed in black. She didn't know what material it was made of, but it was dark and no light reflected off the material. His figure was thin and tall, his hands shriveled like twigs, his eyes were dark, and his entire body was emanating a dense yin energy. The two of them weren't the type to waste words. As their eyes met, the two made their moves at the same time. Su's hands spread slightly, her snow-white fingers lightly grasping at the air. Gue Feng felt the scene in front of him twist slightly, sky and earth spinning, as a feeling of dizziness came over him. Magnet polarity sword. Even though she held no sword in her hand, but her magnet polarity sword essence was still powerful. Gue Feng snorted coldly as his dark hawk-like eyes slightly narrowed. He didn't seem to move but had disappeared from his spot. Sue's hands straightened into sword fingers, swiping at the air beside her side. A white bone ghost sword suddenly shot out of the air. Gue Feng's sword and Sue's fingers seemed to have made an appointment, strangely crashing together. Sue gave a muffled grunt. Gue Feng had compressed all of the sword essence on the tip of his sword. Once the sword and her fingers met, she had been disproportionately impacted. The dark and cold sword essence followed her fingers to enter her body. She felt her body freeze. The white bone ghost sword was snowy white, made from an unknown bone. The sword guard was a complete skull, the open mouth perfectly biting on the sword body, for sharp and curved fangs crisscrossing. In the empty eye sockets, 2 bean-sized ghost fires burned lightly. The sword grip was made of 7 continuous copper coins, wrapped in grass rope. The name of this white bone ghost sword was not known, but at a glance it could seem that it was not ordinary. Behind the black gauze, Sue had a slightly angry expression. Having lost the first encounter, this experience was very rare to her. She had lost because she did not use her flying sword. Even though she was not willing, she still took out a black flying sword. She had originally planned on not using a flying sword before her new flying sword had been forged. Even though the sword named Black Days in her hand was of high quality, it was not very suited for her sword scripture. To a female that was a perfectionist, she was not willing to use a flying sword that was not suited to her. What she was furious about was not having lost the encounter, but that the Gue Feng had forced her to use a flying sword that she didn't want to use. Once Gue Feng had the advantage, what would follow would be continuous attacks that wouldn't give her a chance to breathe. Normally, she would slowly wear him down, but today, she still needed to find Suemo. She didn't have much interest in the sword test conference, but Suemo entering the top 10 impacted the forging of her new flying sword. She needed to quickly finish the fight. Gently turning the handle of Black Days, the sword tip pointing up, it was held in front of her body. The surrounding area around her suddenly started to twist. Only Sue, who was standing at the very center, was unaffected. Just at this time, the white and sharp bone sword suddenly stabbed towards Sue as it appeared out of nowhere in front of her. Sue was not moved. Seeing the other had no intentions to dodge, Gue Feng was slightly surprised, but there was no hesitation in his bone sword. The skull hilt gave a howl, like countless angry souls wailing, shocking a person's soul. If this sword met its target, there was no chance of survival. The speed of the flying sword was extremely quick, arriving in the blink of an eye to touch the black gauze in front of Sue's face. Gue Feng felt slightly joy but also puzzled. Was Sue so weak to be defeated in one blow? In this sword test conference, there were many experts, and among those favored, the 2 that were most mysterious were Gue Feng and Sue. Both of them were of unknown origins. No one had thought the 2 most mysterious competitors would become opponents. He hit the target. Gue Feng was not happy, but shocked. Even though his eyes saw the sword meet the target, but the bone sword in his hand did not feel as though it had hit anything tangible. Not good. With shock, Gue Feng retreated back. For some reason, the bone sword brushed past a space 3 cun from Sue's gauze. The dark and cold energy made her feel uncomfortable, but she did not even blink. The Black Days sword in her hand turned and crossed her chest. Her left hand raised on its own, she quickly spat out 3 notes. She started to counterattack. Suemo wiped the sweat off his forehead, looking in satisfaction at the formation in front of his eyes. He had completely fenced off the half-mu of the pond to become the central formation of the formation. Compared to things like a lake, the water pond had weaker water elemental power, but it was enough for him. Since it was completely fenced in, he didn't need to worry about other people damaging it. 7 palm-sized green flags were on the border of the water pond, responding to each other. The poles of the 7 small flags were made from 3rd-grade greenwood, and the cloth of the flag was woven from 3rd-grade sky silk. With the formations carved in them, the 7 greenwood flags were like 7 roots, taking water elemental power from the water pond and turning it to wood elemental power. Placed around each greenwood flag were 7 second-grade mini copper lionhead Dan cauldrons, forming the shape of the Big Dipper, and supporting the greenwood flag, forming a second-grade, leaf fire formation. Beside each of the 7 Dan cauldrons, there were 12 jade cards scattered around. The 12 jade cards were connected by an extremely thin red-gold thread. A delicate net made from slender red-gold thread entangled the 7 copper Dan cauldrons. It formed a complete, 3-turn fire formation. And the 7 by 7, 49 little Dan cauldrons flashed with light as they interacted with each other, forming another formation, Great Leaf Fire Formation. Borrowing water elemental power to add wooden elemental power, and turning it to fire. Leaf Fire Formation was not a high-level formation. It was commonly engraved in most low-grade Dan cauldrons. Compared to Streaming Fire Formation, Great Leaf Fire Formation was higher grade, and usually constructed of 2 or more leaf fire formations. The Great Leaf Fire Formation that Zhuo setup was composed of 7 entire streaming fire formations. The 7 leaf fire formations were being aided by plentiful wooden elemental energy, after being strengthened by the 3-turn formation. How strong would the fire they produce be? Zhuo was full of expectation, and wanted to find a person to try it on. The entire pond had been turned by Zhuo into an enormous Dan cauldron. It could be imagined just how great the firepower of this great Dan cauldron would be. But he didn't know how high it would reach. The previous experiments he ran had used basic and cheapest materials. He had been somewhat satisfied with the power. This Great Leaf Fire Formation was really piled up using all of his Jingshi. The majority of the components had been bought from the 100 Treasure Flying Pavilion. He took out a bunch of 3 chi long nails from the pile of materials to heave onto his shoulders, his right hand holding an enormously large hammer. Zhuo's eyes flashed with light. Hey, this was just the beginning. Changheng casually walked along the mountain paths as though he was taking a stroll, his expression lazy. He would occasionally stop, and look at the happily fighting Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping. He had encountered a few Xiuzhe, but they acted as though they had seen a ghost, turning and running away. He was too lazy to chase, lazily strolling along. In the last 2 rounds, the outcome of his opponents had been the same, both seriously wounded. One was going to lie on the bed for half a year, and the other 8 months. For most contestants, they were more willing to battle Gu Rongping than Changheng. This was a choice between loss and seriously injured. The great majority were naturally more willing to lose rather than be seriously injured for half a year. Competitors like Changheng that moved around freely had absolute confidence in their power. Normal competitors found places to hide. The longer they stayed in, the higher their ranking. Everyone understood this, and the Xiuzhe that had reached this level, none of them lacked patience. Changheng finally met a Xiuzhe that didn't run away upon seeing him. An extremely average-looking Xiuzhe that had not left an impression on Changheng in previous rounds. A yellow face, a bulbous nose, a short robe. The other appeared extremely calm, looking in interest at him. Changheng suddenly sniffed, tilting his head and muttering to himself, a familiar smell. The other paused, and then had revealed an expression of great joy. Changheng didn't know why the other person would be so happy, just like he didn't know why the other would have a smell that he would find familiar. But he was too lazy to ask, his right hand directly reaching for the copper ring between his clavicles. The toothacheing sound of a blade grinding against bone sounded, a horrifying scene appeared again. The bright red blood spider sword slowly was pulled out. Changheng found the Xiuzhe opposite him was staring at the blood spider sword. The joy had disappeared. Replacing it seemed to be disappointment. Disappointment. Strangely, a smile appeared at the corner of Changheng's mouth. His wiry hair stood like swords, full of killing intent. Luo Li carefully concealed himself in a mountain valley. Compared to the calm of eldest Shixiang and the casualness of Changheng, he was much more cautious. He sat down cross-legged at the center of the valley, his flying sword floating perpendicular to the ground beside him. His eyes were tightly closed as he nurtured the sword essence inside. He was like a hunter waiting for his prey. Any enemy that appeared at the mouth of the valley would face his long-prepared attack. Thinking back to his former arrogance, he was like a bystander that judged himself. He had wanted to use the empty sword scripture and shapeless sword scripture to recover void sword scripture, but had accidentally walked onto another road, a road that belonged to himself. His talent was not as awe-inspiring as Wei Sheng, but it was still better than others. Before Wei Sheng and Zhuo Mo had appeared, he had been the most outstanding disciple of Wukong's sword sect. It was the heap of favor that he had received that had gradually caused his pride and conceit. His entire person had become impetuous. Zhuo Mo's blow had been like an alarm, shaking him awake. The Luo Li that had woken up was abnormally hardworking and started to display his talent. The person who had earned the greatest benefits from the opening of the sect's records had been Luo Li. No one was clear on what Wei Sheng had received in his trip of the Sword Cave, but eldest Shixiang was not interested at all in the records. Zhuo Mo was only interested in dan-making, forging, and formation. Other than flipping through Ice Dragon sword scripture, he didn't even look at any other sword scripture. Luo Li was different. Unable to achieve anything from studying empty sword scripture and shapeless sword scripture, he could only search for another road. As though he was dying of thirst, he had read through almost all the sword scriptures in the sect, in hopes that they could inspire him. Especially the 4th grade sword scriptures like Cloud Sword Scripture, Red Flame Sword Scripture, and Greenstone Sword Scripture, he had repeatedly read over and over. No one would have thought that, just by using these 3 sword scriptures, he had really merged empty sword scripture and shapeless sword scripture. But the newly merged sword scripture was different from void sword scripture. Luo Li named it self-separation. Chapter 138, Aggravation and Pleasure. Yu Bai had not found Zhong Mingyan. That slightly disappointed him. He suddenly noticed, not far away, there stood a golden armored soldier. He recognized it as a seal soldier. The fact that Zhuo Mo had challenged Ling Ying's sect was not known by the non-locals, but it had spread widely in Dongfu locally. Naturally, one piece of important information had been Zhuo Mo had taken a seal soldier, so Yu Bai knew of it. He hadn't thought that Zhuo Mo would be so close to him. Yu Bai shook his head. He didn't have much interest in Zhuo Mo. Even though the other had displayed outstanding talent, Yu Bai looked down on doing something such as bullying a Zhuji Xiuzhe. His master and Wukong's sword sect were on good relations. He was not willing to disrupt this kind of friendly relationship. He was even considering that if there was the chance, he would help Zhuo Mo out. But, very quickly, he did not have the attention to spare to think about this question because he saw a great enemy. A large man holding a gigantic sword the size of a door, stomping heavily as he neared. The other had already noticed him. Yu Bai could feel the other nearing, as his presence was quickly rising. Nan Men Yang, the brightest grassroots Xiuzhe in this sword test conference. This extremely large-figured man was extremely talented. Practicing the 2nd grade, Vajra scripture, and using the 2nd grade, Mountain Breaker sword, combined for astonishing power. Because he belonged to no family or sect, he quickly became the piece of jade that all sects were vying for. The benefits each sect offered him quickly rose. According to those familiar, Gu Rongping had represented Heart Lake sect to give an invitation. Other than that, almost all the large sects had made an offer. He was only 24 years this year, his potential seemed limitless. Nan Men Yang was the largest Xiuzhe in the sword test conference. His height of 1 zhang made him look like a moving mountain. All the muscles on his body were hard and powerful, the hard curves carved as they gave off the special faint gold light from the Vajra scripture, a presence that pressured others and suffocated them. His strides were long, steady, and heavy, and one couldn't help but feel the ground was shaking as he walked. Zhuo Mo felt the vibration of the ground and raised his head. However, due to the dense foliage of the trees, he couldn't see the figure of Nan Men Yang. After muttering a few words, he continued his work. 3 long metal nails glowed with a cool blue light. Barely visible were the patterns of formations that covered the entire body of the nails. Zhuemo spat into his palms and raised the large metal hammer, channeling Vajra Profound Sutra, as he pounded the metal nail into the ground. In total, there were 9 large metal nails that were hammered into the ground by Zhuemo according to specific locations. They formed the beginnings of a formation. After the hammering, Zhuemo didn't wipe his sweat away as he stood at the center of the formation, his fingers flying as he spat out a string of rushed notes. The cool blue light started to spread from the 9 metal nails into the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, with Zhuemo as the center, a circle with radius of 30 zhang was completely dyed with blue light. Zhuemo suddenly shouted, "Set!" The blue light that had been spreading instantly stopped. They brightened and then disappeared. Zhuemo released the Ling power on his hands, collapsing onto his behind on the ground as he panted. Oh dear, this 9 metal earth formation might not be a high-grade formation, but it really used up a lot of Ling power. 9 metal earth formation was a second-grade formation. It only had one ability: it turned all the earth within the area of the formation as hard as metal, preventing enemies from attacking from below the earth. After solving the problem of defending the earth, the next he had to solve was defending against the sky. This time, Zhuemo chose to use the dragon tying formation. If a Ningmai Xiuzhou was trapped by the dragon tying formation, they usually couldn't get out quickly. What Zhuemo needed was just that little amount of time. Out of caution, Zhuemo set down 6 dragon tying formation, almost covering all angles. Not everyone's eyes were fixed on Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping. Some people were noticing every single one of Zhuemo's actions. What does he want to do? Yan Mingzi dazedly asked Hu Shan. Hu Shan was also gaping. He woodenly shook his head. Don't know, is he trying to build a cave residence there? Tao Zhu looked as though she had seen a ghost. This, at the place that the disciples of Wukong's sword sect were gathering, everyone's expressions became extremely strange. Zuoshidi's thinking, Li Yingfeng's face was red, and she forced out, extremely unique. Xiaoguo's eyes were full of stars, extremely admiring. Xixiang is very strong. To be able to think of such a powerful method. Too powerful. The expression of the disciples that heard this became even stranger. So embarrassing. Yan Lu sighed, covering his head, not bearing to look. We are Sword Xiu. Shi Feng Rong's face was black. When he comes back, we need to sort out this rascal. He really humiliated us. Wukong's sword sect to the ground. The cold light in Xian Yan's eyes were like the dance of countless blades. His voice seemed to come out of a deep glacier, so cold that people's hearts shook. I'll teach him what a sword Xiu is. Pei Yuan Ran, who had the greatest experience in keeping his composure, felt his face was extremely red. He seemed to hear the memorial tablets of the ancestral masters in Wukong Hall were all jumping, the ancestral masters beating their chests and stomping their feet. Embarrassment, embarrassment, so humiliating, you unfilial disciples, I need to climb out. Pei Yuan Ran felt as though his entire body was freezing. As he looked at the Zhuemo in the mirage happily setting up his formations without a hint of stopping, his breath choked at his throat. His face was suffocating so much it was red, his fingers trembling. Just at this time, he heard Xiaoguo's innocent voice. Why says that Xixiang is an embarrassment? Xixiang's formation looks very powerful. Pei Yuan Ran felt his vision turn black. He almost fainted. At least, there is Wei Sheng. He comforted himself like this. Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping's battle quickly reached the climax. The tip of the main peak soared over the other mountains, clouds occasionally floating past the body of the mountain. No one would have thought that Wei Sheng could display such power. Based just on the level of cultivation, Wei Sheng definitely had no hope of winning. However, real battle did not mean that those of the higher cultivation stage would win. But even if Wei Sheng lost this fight, no one would ever doubt his strength again. Even if Gu Rongping won, the title of the strongest among the younger generation of Sky Moon Jia would still be Wei Sheng. Gu Rongping was also clear about this, so his expression was very ugly, ugly like it had never been before. He had never thought that anyone in the younger generation would surpass him. Maybe there was, but certainly not in Sky Moon Jie. Who was Wei Sheng? Where was Wukong's sword sect? A few months ago, who even knew? A person who had been unknown suddenly took away the halo around him, and had done it in front of this many people. Hate slid across Gu Rongping's eyes. His sword presence became increasingly vicious. But the elders that were watching all shook their heads and sighed. Gu Rongping's heart lake sword was based on the heart as a lake, clear and without waves. But right now, Gu Rongping's sword presence was full of viciousness. Compared to the emptiness previously, even though the power looked to have increased, but in reality, he was losing. Facing Gu Rongping's sharp sword presence, Wei Sheng had no thoughts of retreat. His square face and thick brows were miles away from Gu Rongping's handsomeness and elegance. Yet the steady square face, at this time, had a different kind of charisma. Only those Jindan experts with their keen eyes could sensitively catch the doubt that occasionally flashed through his eyes. That was the chaos and unsteadiness of the stage of heart-turned sword essence. Some of the elders and sect leaders took the chance to teach the disciples beside them what was heart-turned sword essence. Originally, Wei Sheng, with his unsteady situation, was not expected to win against Gu Rongping. However, Gu Rongping had lost his equilibrium, and did not give Wei Sheng enough of a threat. What Wei Sheng was now relying on was Void Sword Scripture. The long-lost Sword Scripture, Void Sword Scripture, finally showed itself in his hands. Even Pei Yuan ran and the others didn't look away. The experts that were watching felt an unparalleled shock. 6th grade Sword Scripture, this was the best Sword Scripture in Sky Moon Jia without a doubt. Gu Rongping felt extremely uncomfortable. Wei Sheng's sword moves seemed to be intangible and invisible. It was untraceable, and what made him want to spit blood the most was the other's sword essence. It was clearly a tangible and sharp sword essence, but upon impact, it was like hitting empty space, as though that sword essence was a mirage rather than tangible. But if he did not pay attention to it, there would definitely be countless more holes on his body. Gu Rongping had never fought as uncomfortably as this. The other's sword essence was really too strange. It really was out of the norm. What he cultivated was Heart Lake Sword Scripture. It was the secret of Heart Lake Sword Sect and was ranked high in 5th grade. Did the other's sword scripture have a higher grade than Heart Lake Sword Scripture? Impossible. A backwater little sect, how could it have a sword scripture over 5th grade? Gu Rongping tightened his jaw, staring at Wei Sheng, the sword presence rising. Since he could not understand, then he wouldn't understand. Gu Rongping resolved his heart. Our sect's Void Sword Scripture is as wondrous as expected. Rather than the aggravation as he looked at Zui Mo, Yan Li's face was light as he watched Wei Sheng's fight. Xian Yan didn't have the attention to talk. His eyes were opened wide as he stared at Wei Sheng unblinkingly. Pei Yuan Ran's eyes were dazedly looking in the distance, muttering, "Master, this disciple has not failed, Void Sword Scripture had always been a sickness on his heart." Now that it could see the light of day again, he was naturally very excited. The 4 elders of Wukong's sword sect were skilled and had found fame in Yao Hunt, but were willing to lurk in Dongfu. It had all been for this, for the succession of the sect. Now that there was a disciple of limitless potential like Wei Sheng and Void Sword Scripture had been restored, his heart was beating rapidly. Such a situation, everyone understood that Wukong's sword sect would definitely become one of the top sects in Sky Moon Jie. In possession of such a wondrous sword scripture, and having a disciple of unparalleled talent, Wukong's sword sect could not be stopped. Some with nimble minds started thinking about reacquainting themselves with this sect that had appeared out of nowhere. And other people, like the sect leader of Lingying's sect, had a terrible expression. If Wukong's sword sect had been a power unable to be dismissed before, then the present Wukong sword sect would squeeze into the top ranks of the Sky Moon Jia sections. Ling Ying's sect had already lost the qualification to compete with them. At this moment, Wei Shen was like the sun that was burning in the sky, releasing rays of unparalleled bright rays. All the other competitors were like the stars beside the sun, completely diminished and dark. Zuo did not know anything about these situations. All of his focus was on the formation in front of him. He wiped away the sweat on his face, and started to create the most important part of this formation group. Sky Ring Moon Chime Formation. Chapter 139, Formation Defense Style. The ferocity of Su's counterattack surprised Guo Feng. After the 3 rushed notes were spat out from behind the black gauze, the black day's sword that was held horizontally in front of Su's body began glowing. The surrounding space twisted as if pulled by an invisible hand. There was no wind, but one felt as though the space was collapsing. Guo Feng's white bone sword trembled, the 2 dots of ghost fire in the eye sockets of the skull guard flickered like a candle flame, and seemed ready to be extinguished at any moment. Guo Feng's expression changed dramatically. The Ling energy around Su's body was extremely chaotic. The white bone sword was like a little boat in a storm, about to capsize at any moment. That moment just now, he had almost lost his connection to the white bone sword. What sword scripture was this? Full of shock, Guo Feng decided to retreat. Su instantly detected Guo Feng's intentions. She snorted coldly, her right hand actually letting go of the hilt of Black Day's. The Black Day's sword did not drop to the ground, but floated horizontal and was spinning rapidly. At the same time, a clear hum started to sound like that of a bell, sometimes near and then far away. As the bell sounded, countless invisible magnetic lines formed a gigantic net, heading for the white bone sword. Magnetic Polarity Net. Without a flying sword, a sword shio was just a tiger with no claws nor teeth. Guo Feng was not willing to surrender. The cold light in his eyes grew, his body twisted slightly and he disappeared on his spot. Ghost movement. At the same time, he appeared in the magnetic net. Falling into the web. Su was slightly surprised. Appearing in the magnetic web, the first thing Guo Feng did was reach to grab the white bone sword. Once the white bone sword entered his palm, Guo Feng felt very secure. He had understood Su's sword scripture. The strongest attribute of the magnetic force sword scriptures was that they could manipulate the Ling energy in the world, affecting the connection and blocking the sword shio from their flying sword. If they cultivated to high levels, they could easily control the magnetic forces of the world to their will, possibly even creating their own world, extremely powerful. However, Su was far from that step. Holding the copper coin hilt, Guo Feng's wrist shook. A shriek came from the white bone sword, like a soul wailing. A ball of black mist flew out of the flying sword, suddenly exploding and turning into countless wisps of thin smoke that spread in all directions. In the blink of an eye, there were countless thumb-sized black ghosts in the surroundings. Formed from the black smoke, these were little black ghosts, their faces like those of a leper that were extremely ugly. They appeared extremely horrifying, their bellies were round, their limbs short and stout, and their eyes were an eerie green. The dense crowd of little ghosts floated beside Guo Feng, so many they could not be counted, fearful to the bystander. Guo Feng's pupils were a strange dark black, so deep the bottom could not be seen. His face, which had been dark and thin in the beginning, was now completely robbed of vitality, so white it was like that of a dead person. Behind the black gauze, Su's expression finally changed. Guo Feng grumbled a sound, and the white bone sword in his hand pointed at Su. Little ghost asked directions. Creak, all the little ghosts in the sky simultaneously gave a strange howl. Their features twisted as they turned to countless black images and headed towards Su. These little ghosts were extremely fast, their bodies blurring as they would suddenly disappear in the sky, and then suddenly appear out of the air. Ghost movement. These little ghosts had the ability of ghost movement. Su did not dare to keep her strength now, her right palm firmly hitting the sword hilt of the Black Days that was spinning. The Black Days sword was like a windmill as it spun, circles of invisible magnetic force suddenly spreading out. A thin snow-white finger pointed at the center of the black light wheel. Magnetic shield. The invisible magnetic force that was spread by the wheel of light instantly increased to the point that the ripple-like patterns were visible to the naked eye. The invisible patterns quickly covered Sue. The vicious and raging little ghosts, when they encountered the invisible patterns, were instantly deflected back. But these little ghosts were not damaged in the least. With a strange howl, they kept on leaping towards Sue. This seemed like a black storm that would never stop, howls ringing out endlessly. The little ghosts did not seem to know exhaustion, repeatedly charging at Sue. The invisible patterns were like the surface of a lake that was being attacked by the storm, rippling restlessly, but no matter how the little ghosts charged, it managed to firmly protect Sue. The battle instantly became a standoff. Neither could win over the other. Gui Feng's ebony black eyes looked deeply at Sue behind the magnetic shield, and suddenly disappeared on his spot. Disappearing along with him were the countless little ghosts. This black storm had come suddenly, and left even more abruptly. Sue took a breath, but did not dare to move aside her finger. Only when she was certain that Gui Feng was not beside her did she move her finger aside, releasing the magnetic shield. Only now did she discover, without her noticing, her back had become soaked with sweat. Sue, who had been very certain that she could guarantee that Zhou Mo would enter the top 10, realized that she had underestimated the heroes of the world. Calming down her messy Ling power, she decided to go find Zhou Mo immediately. The faster she found Zhou Mo, the higher the chance they could win this battle. Up until now, she still had not received Zhou Mo's paper crane. This made her heart fill with worry. Did the little zombie have such terrible luck? Had he encountered danger so early? She unconsciously sped up. If she had an appropriate flying sword just now. Zhou Mo had long thrown the matter of the paper crane to the back of his mind. All of his attention was on his Sky Ring Moonchime formation. The Sky Ring Moonchime formation was the formation he had gotten in payment for processing the inky black lotus seed. It was the only 4th grade formation in his possession, so after he had received it, he had spent large amounts of time on it. He had made a very profound conclusion. Formations above 4th level weren't that simple. Sky Ring Moonchime formation did not look very complex. It was a mother and child formation. The grade of each child formation was not high, most of them 2nd grade. The formation that was the crux was just a 3rd grade formation. But the more he studied it, the more Zhou Mo felt this Sky Ring Moonchime formation was not simple. The difficulty of each child formation was not high and he could easily complete it, but fitting all of them together greatly increased the difficulty. The smallest, Sky Ring Moonchime formation, required 18 child formations. The more child formations there were, the more powerful the formation became. The power of a 36 child formation, Sky Ring Moonchime formation, was extremely powerful. If Zhou Mo was trapped in it, he definitely could not get out. Zhou Mo had decided to make a 72 child formation, Sky Ring Moonchime formation. 72 child formations and 36 child formations, the number of child formations had doubled, but the difference in the power had more than doubled. The little mountain of materials was mostly prepared for the Sky Ring Moonchime formation. If this formation was successfully set up, Zhou Mo felt the likelihood of a Ningmai Shouja coming out once they were trapped in the formation was low. Also, the Sky Ring Moonchime formation was extremely profound. It was impossible to damage the formation just through brute force, unless someone found the eye of the formation. But at the eye of the formation, Zhou Mo had just carefully made a gigantic Dan cauldron. It was a pity he didn't have the time to fantasize about his enemies being burnt. Zhou Mo needed to quickly finish the formation. It required large amounts of time to set up the 72 child formations. So in Zhou Mo's plan, it was to first make an 18 children formation, Sky Ring Moonchime formation, and with that as the base, add another 18, forming a 36, Sky Ring Moonchime formation. Increasing it step by step, it would make sure he still had the power to fight if an enemy sneaked up. He was extremely proud that he had thought of such a great plan. His cultivation wasn't enough, so Ji won't compete in cultivation with you people. Looking at the formations that he had already set up, Zuomo's heart was filled with accomplishment. With the pond as the center, the groups of formations, jade pieces, copper cauldrons, and metal nails flashed with blinding light. The pond had been half a mu large in the beginning. This formation territory had reached an area of 5 mu. Originally, not many people had been paying attention to Zuo, but when this 5 mu of formations were completed, all kinds of lights came and crossed. In comparison to this gigantic light-emitting formation area, the golden armored seal soldier that was summoned it was extremely tiny. This formation belt was really too eye-catching. The people watching from the gigantic mirage in Dongfu could easily find it with a glance. Consequently, many people unconsciously looked at this sparkling formation belt. Their expression were strangely similar, all gaping with wide eyes, dumbstruck where they were. Pei Yuan Ran and the others had abnormally ugly expressions. Because their cultivation was too high, they could easily hear the conversation in the surroundings. I heard this guy is from Wukong Sword Sect, he isn't the normal kind of extreme. Are you sure it isn't Wukong Formation Sect? Pei Yuan Ran's eyebrows twitched. The other three had dark expressions. The four of them had a strong impulse they had never had before, charge into the Great Pine Pavilion, and cut Zuo down with a blow to pay for his crime towards the ancestral masters. Another kind of conversation was going on at the other side. I understand now. A Xiuzhe suddenly stood up, his face full of realization, extremely excited. Hearing this, his companions hurriedly crowded over. What do you understand? The Xiuzhe was extremely excited. Zuomo's true aim is to get the entire Great Pine Pavilion. He's putting on a disguise and winning in the dark. He wants to slowly take over the Great Pine Pavilion. Right, the books say this is called nibbling. At this time, not just Pei Yuan Ran, but all of the Wukong Sword Sect disciples, were so embarrassed they wanted to find a crack in the ground to hide in. This disciple is unfilial. To have shamed the ancestral masters. Tears streamed down Pei Yuan Ran's face, extremely sorrowful. Xian Yan's hand unconsciously touched his flying sword, his voice seeming to have come out of purgatory. I will let him know that he cannot go to Wukong Formation Sect. Yan Lu, who was usually cheerful, gritted his teeth. From next month, I'll stop all of his allowance. He won't get one more jingshi from me. Shi Feng Rong's response was very calm. Don't worry, I'll help heal him. He definitely won't die. You can slowly work on him. The disciples in the surroundings were shuddering as they unconsciously distanced themselves from the exploding elders. Zuo, not knowing that he had provoked public rage, was extremely proud. He turned into a laborious worker ant, energetically continuing his great endeavor of construction. Just 5 mu, it was too small. Once the 72 child formation, Skyring Moon Chime Formation, was completely set up, it would form a gigantic formation belt over 15 mu large. Zuo called his new idea, Formation Defense Style. The full name was Complete Formation Territory Defense Style. Today was the day destined for Formation Defense Style to become famous. Zuo was extremely motivated, his heart full of anticipation. Chapter 140, Self-Separation. Changheng and the yellow-faced man fought fiercely. The strangely shaped copper ring, the blood spider sword, shined a sticky bloody color each time it was waved. A noxious odor wafted forth. His strength was much stronger compared to when he had fought Zuo. Yet the yellow-faced man in front of him moved with ease. A copper dagger axe flew around him. The copper dagger axe emitted a green-blue light. As it flew, it formed a blue curtain. The bloody light was not able to break through this fragile-looking green-blue curtain of light. Cultivation using blood, how extremely obscure, the yellow-faced man said. It's a pity that you didn't cultivate it correctly, you just have the appearance of it. Just the appearance? Changheng's pupils slightly shrunk. His fingers twitching slightly, the bloody spider sword that was over his fingers flew into the sky. As the sword flew, it turned into an enormous shadow. Boom! 6 thick legs heavily hit the ground, dust flying away as the ground trembled slightly. A bloody spider stared fiercely at the yellow-faced man. Compared to when it had faced Suemo, it was more than double its previous size. The 6 legs of the spider were slender and long, full of hooks. The joints were much thicker, stronger and more powerful. The dark patterns on the surface of the blood spider was more evident than before, and there was a slightly metallic sheen, making sure people would not doubt its hardness. What made others the most terrified was the face of the blood spider. The flat face seemed to have a few marks reminiscent of a human face. This face that seemed human-like was extremely vicious and cruel, a brutal presence emanating from it. Oh, not bad. To be able to cultivate almost to the step of human face, you have some talent, the yellow-faced man said. However, some parts of your cultivation are not correct. If you do not correct it, there will be many side effects. For the first time, a serious expression came onto Chang Heng's face. The yellow-faced man expressed through his facial expressions and speech that he was familiar with Chang Heng's cultivation scripture. He might be part of Ling Ying's sect, but the scripture he practiced was not one of Ling Ying's sect's scriptures. He had obtained the scripture and the bloody spider sword from a Xiuzhe that he killed. However, the scripture he had obtained was not complete. Evidently, its previous owner had not received it through proper channels. The blood method was extremely powerful, but at the same time, it was much more dangerous than normal scriptures. Just the tiniest mistake, and it could rebound and kill him. Chang Heng's personality might seem dominant and vicious, but he was extremely careful when he cultivated. The yellow-faced man's words shot straight into Chang Heng's heart. Chang Heng suddenly took back the blood spider. What do you want for it? The yellow-faced man gave an expression of praise. Find me after the competition. Finishing, his figure disappeared where he stood. Chang Heng's heart shook. Regardless of whether the yellow-faced man had been fooling him or not, but just judging from his method of movement, it was apparent the yellow-faced man was more powerful than he was. From the first clash between Chang Heng and the yellow-faced man, a very short time had passed. Compared to the flashiness of the other battles, their fight did not attract anyone's attention. Meng Qing was like a cat as he carefully traversed through the woods. He was most skilled in concealment and assassination, and had once even escaped the pursuit of a Jindan expert. But this time he was even more careful. The 15 mountains covered a large area, but if there were 100 Ningmai Xiuzhe fighting, then this battlefield could not be considered large. Quite the reverse, this battlefield was too small. Since the battlefield was small, the fighting had become chaotic and extremely fierce. What he needed to be careful about was, other than him, that the 99 other people were all his enemies. Different than the other Xiuzhe, he had a clear goal. However, when he thought about it, he felt it strange. A Zhuji Xiuzhe, was it worth spending Jingshi for him kill the person? He looked down at it inside. A Zhuji Xiuzhe, how could he pass through the last round of fighting? However, since he received the client's Jingshi, he still decided to complete the job. In his business, having a good reputation was everything. His own cultivation was limited and there were not many jobs he could complete. Usually, his living was very tight. Coming to the sword test conference was because he wanted the prize. Then the luck came. Someone had actually found him and requested a job. The payment was extremely tempting, and most importantly, the target was the only Zhuji Xiuzhe in the sword test conference. If it was any other person, he might be slightly unconfident, but since it was Zuemo, he did not hesitate in accepting the job. He had seen Chaoan and Zuemo's fight. Truthfully, to win from a disadvantage, he admired Zuemo. He was suspicious that the person who made the request was Chaoan. Chaoan must have been unable to bear being eliminated and was now scheming from the shadows. However, what did that have to do with him? He wouldn't be at odds with Jingshi. These days, it was hard to make a living. Other than concealment, his battle abilities were average. There were not many jobs he could usually do. He was full of confidence for this job. He thought that the reason Zhuo Mo could defeat Chaoan was that Chaoan had underestimated his opponent. Also, Zhuo Mo had prepared very well beforehand. If it had been him, he definitely wouldn't have given Zhuo Mo so many chances to fight. From the beginning, he hadn't thought of fighting openly. No matter how weak Zhuo Mo was, he would persist in an ambush. In any case, he was just going for the Jingshi. However, to complete this job, he needed to find Zhuo Mo first. This was the most troublesome part of his job. Alright, Jingshi wouldn't just drop from the sky. If there was no difficulty, other people wouldn't have spent so much Jingshi to hire him. He carefully controlled his body, like a blurry shadow, as he carefully moved among the trees. The color around his body kept on blending in with the surroundings. His presence was kept inside his body, it was as though he did not exist and his presence was difficult to detect. It was only due to his skills with this technique that no one had found him along the way. He was especially careful today. The surroundings were all filled with Ningmai Xiuzhe, and there was no lack of experts. If he was found, he didn't have a chance of victory. There was a mountain valley up ahead. Meng Qing decided to take a look. Zhuo Mo's own cultivation was lower than other people, and naturally wouldn't dare to walk around. After taking the job, he had been constantly pondering. He felt it was most probable that Zhuo Mo would find a corner and use formation to defend his position. So during his search, he was especially attentive to places like mountain valleys and other hiding places. The mouth of the valley up ahead was especially narrow. He didn't dare to be brash, and carefully moved around by taking advantage of the geographic landscape. Inside the mountain valley, Luoli sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. His flying sword was silently floating beside him. He was like a volcano, looking peaceful on the surface, but the sword essence was boiling inside. Today would be the first time he used self-separation in battle. There was a strange excitement welling up inside. This unnameable excitement was like a soundless flame, burning every bit of his body. But he did not move, he was motionless like an old monk in meditation. He was suppressing this excitement that made him want to fight. The air around him moved without a wind pushing it. Inside the little valley, it was like a tornado had started. However, what people would gasp at was that, no matter how strong the wind was inside the valley, there was no hint of it at the mouth of the valley. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. Someone was here. Self-separation had been created with shapeless sword scripture and empty sword scripture as the rope and cloud sword scripture, red flame sword scripture, and greenstone sword scripture as the beads. He had put a lot of thought into it. Even though it was limited by his cultivation and knowledge, there were still many wonderful aspects, even Xian Yan Shibwa had praised it. Luoli remained cross-legged as his mind expanded with him at the center, to a radius of 10 zhang. The mountain rocks, and the trees, slowly disappeared, like they were vanishing into space, turning into a patch of emptiness. He was sitting in the center of a void. The slightest animal, if they entered this patch of void, would become evident, and he would easily detect it. It would be as though a drop of black ink appeared on a piece of snow-white paper. No matter how small the ink dot was, it would be abnormally startling. Meng Qing's body was blended with the surroundings. He was hard to see using the naked eye, but in this patch of void in Luo Li's mind, he detected that there was another person. The excitement that had been suppressed for so long in his chest finally found a vent. In reverse to the heat and excitement in his eyes, his expression was serious. His right hand opened, palm faced away from his body. His thumb and pinky crossed as the other 3 fingers pointed at the sky. The silently floating flying sword was like a vicious beast that had woken up from its dreams, opening its blood-red eyes, and baring its sharp fangs. A clear hum sounded in the air. On the sword a green and red light entwined like 2 Ling lovers in a passionate embrace, extremely joyful. Separate. A light sigh, unable to be traced, spoken as though from far away but like a murmur close to the ear. The red and green light gradually turned to white light. The joy on the sword quickly became faint, a feeling of loneliness rose, like the autumn wind blowing. The white flying sword did not move fast. Like a piece of ice, the flying sword quickly melted into the air with speed invisible to the naked eye. At the moment Luoli moved, Meng Qing knew that he had been detected. Not daring to hesitate, he jumped up and sprinted for the opening of the valley. The shocking transformation of the other's flying sword made his skin on his head prickle. What sword scripture was that? Especially when he saw the other's flying sword disappear into space, the danger he felt suddenly reached a peak. In his profession, the thing most trusted was instinct. Each time that he had a bad feeling, he knew there was danger. But such a strong feeling of danger as he had today, he had only encountered it before, when he had been pursued by that Jin Dan expert. Fuck. Didn't they say it was all Ningmai Shouja? Did he encounter Gu Rongping? Damn it, he should not be so unlucky. Meng Qing paled. The feeling of danger might not rival the last time when he had met the Jin Dan expert, but it secured the position of second. His heart jumped rapidly. He didn't dare to keep anything back, all of his Ling power furiously channeling behind him as he leapt to get out of the valley. Behind him, a Ling shield formed, looking slightly like a turtle shell. He had just taken one step when something invisible suddenly hit the Ling shield on his back. The solid and hard Ling shield instantly shattered into pieces. Pew! It was as though Meng Qing had been struck by lightning, his pupils suddenly expanding. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and instantly became unconscious. A figure landed from the sky, lightly inspecting the unconscious Meng Qing before saying indifferently, "Eliminated." After that, he grabbed Meng Qing and disappeared. But before he left, the gaze he threw at Luoli contained a hint of shock. Chapter 141, Zhong Mingyan vs. Sua Mo. Zhong Mingyan's face was dark. Seeing Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping's battle with his own eyes, and the power the two showed that was clearly a notch above him. The proud him really did not feel very good seeing the fight. In a terrible mood, he threw away all concealment, the sword essence on his body vibrating as he waited for some idiot to land on his hands. Zhong Mingyan, as the first seat disciple of Dong Qi sword sect, the beloved disciple of Zhua Mei Tian, was not weak. Now that he was not disguising it, his presence revealed, most Shouja turned and left upon seeing him. Those that had some power were also not willing to use up their Ling power this quickly. Everyone knew the earlier they used up their Ling energy, the faster they would be eliminated. This round was not just testing strength, but patience. He heard sounds of fighting in the distance, snorted and headed over. Nan Men Yang's body was glittering with gold light, hand holding an enormous sword, eyes bulging, as his mountain-like figure moved ferociously. Not far from him, Yubai was dressed in white. Even though his demeanor was not as extraordinary as Gu Rongping, he was also warm and elegant. His long bamboo-like sword danced around him, battling the other to a standstill. The two of them were very strong, especially Nan Men Yang's mountain breaker sword. It was extremely forceful and domineering. Each blow howled like thunder, as though it really had the power to break mountains. The elders and sect leaders of each sect that watched their battle all sighed in admiration. This Nan Meng Yan is extremely talented. Just a second grade, mountain breaker sword, is this powerful in his hands. If this boy works hard, he will definitely become an expert. Right. Who can take him into the sect, will have another expert. In reverse, no one was surprised at Yubai's strength. Wukong sword sect's elders also noticed Nan Men Yang, the brightest non-sect Shouja of this sword test conference. Shixiang, this boy really isn't bad. Should we also consider making an offer? Yen Lu didn't bear to tear his eyes away, as though he had seen a treasure. Pei Yuanran pondered for a while and shook his head helplessly. This boy is full of potential, but you know our assets as well as I do. Wei Sheng is just enough for us to deal with, and we have Zhua Mo who is even more of a headache. Luo Li had improved greatly, and his personality is much better than before. If we nurture him well, his future will also be bright. When other people were having a headache over not having talented disciples in the sect, Pei Yuanran was being troubled by having too many talented disciples. Our wealth isn't that big of a problem. After this sword test conference, I'm afraid we cannot stay low like we did previously. We should fight for what we need. These years, I've been very uncomfortable being suppressed. When Yan Lu said this, he was full of bravado. Pei Yuanran grinned, the light in his eyes flashing. Xin Yen suddenly inserted, there's no scripture suited for him. Only now did they think about this crucial problem. Yan Menyang was really talented, but that depended on the scripture he practiced. Even though Vajra scripture and Mountain Breaker sword was only second grade, but because it was suited to him, it was extremely powerful. If the scripture was not suited, then it was hard to say how far he could cultivate. Those with experienced eyes could see with a glance that Nan Menyang was a shouja that needed special scriptures. Shi Feng Rong suddenly said, isn't Zhuemo practicing Vajra Profound Sutra? Why don't we let him also practices Vajra Profound Sutra? Pei Yuanran grimaced, Vajra Profound Sutra is just a normal third-grade body cultivation scripture. Many sects have this scripture. We really cannot offer anything of substance. Alright, we shouldn't pull him over and then waste his talent. That will be our crime. The other people fell silent. None of Wukong Sword sect's sword scriptures were very suited for Nan Menyang, so they gave up on the thought. Yan Lu suddenly pointed at the mirage and said, isn't that boy Zong Ming Yen? He's very near that rascal. The others might have many opinions of Zhuemo, but he was still a disciple of their sect. Hearing this, they followed Yan Li's finger. But when their eyes saw where Zhuemo was, they were instantly angered. The sparkling 5 mu of formations had been eye-catching enough already. But in this short period of time, the formation belt that spread to twice that area, taking over 10 mu. What was the guy trying to do? That was the first thought that jumped into their head. The second thought was, that was it. They really lost face this time. The previous 5 mu of formations had just been a little pieces of land among the large green mountains. Right now, it was a glowing big patch. Zhuemo was passing through the formations, not knowing exhaustion. If one looked closely, they could find the pride and excitement that could not be disguised by his face. If they knew how to lip read, they could easily know what he was muttering. Fighting with Ji, kill you. Can't beat you in cultivation, Ji will use Jingshi to smash you to death. Who said that Jingshi can cause people to bow to Ji? I'm very poor, but I'm very wretched, but lip reading was not a profound skill. There were many people that knew how to do it. Occasionally, people would burst into laughter. The 4 elders felt that in this sword test conference, their already fragile spirits were greatly tortured. Whenever someone beside them laughed, they would be paranoid in feeling that those people were laughing at them. They became 4 easily alarmed birds. The heavens take pity. The honored sect leader of Wukong Sword Sect. Ice Dragon Sword of a vicious reputation. Even Yan Lu and Shi Feng Rong were Jin Dan experts. They were actually tormented by a Zhuji disciple to the point of wanting to die. They were almost driven into insanity. Zong Ming Yen was truly heading for Zhuemo. He had actually wanted to fight with Yu Bai, but since Yu Bai was locked in fierce combat with Nan Menyang, he naturally could not interfere. For them, stooping to using low tactics to win was not an honorable thing. No matter if it was Yu Bai or Zong Ming Yen, they were extremely proud. They definitely could not tolerate themselves winning because they took advantage of someone else. So Zong Ming Yen could only change his target. The seal soldier's head that was a length above the trees was like a lighthouse glowing in the dark, attracting Zong Ming Yen to come closer. Now that's something interesting to see. Zong Ming Yen meeting the scalping zombie. It's karma. I hate people who use Jingshi to smash others the most. He's losing the face of us Dong Fu Sword Xiu. Zong Ming Yen, Ji supports you. Get him down quickly, he's too much of an embarrassment. The shame of Dong Fu. Hearing the consensual indignation of the Dong Fu sword Xiu, Pei Yuan ran and the others wanted to clap in agreement. Huff. Yen Lu exhaled deeply, this is great. He finally can't keep going. It was as though a heavy weight had been lifted off Pei Yuan Ran's shoulders. It's not embarrassing to lose to Zhongming Yan. Xin Yan gave his rare agreement, die early to be reincarnated. The three of them had the same opinion, hoping that Zhongming Yan could quickly finish the fight. That way, Zuo would have less time to embarrass everyone. Now, they felt that it was the stupidest decision of their lives to make Zuo attend the last round of the sword test conference. Wei Sheng had earned the sect lots of praise, but it was far from the amount that Zuo embarrassed the sect by. They really lost. Only Shi Fengrong didn't feel that great. Why is it Zhongming Yan? I don't like Zuo Mei Tian, he's an old bandit. She suddenly turned her face, Wei Sheng should go and kick Zuo out. Pei Yuan Ran pondered it. Fighting among the sect, that might not be good. Yan Lu gave an idea from the side, let Zhongming Yan first kick Zuo out, then let Wei Sheng kick Zhongming Yan out. Xin Yan, who had been silent, suddenly opened, splendid. At the doorway to every casino, a wagering match of Zuo facing Zhongming Yan was quickly put up. The shopkeepers doing their best to holler. Shaking all of Dong Fu, a wager of 10 moves. The most unpopular choice of the last 2 rounds, can the zombie do it again? It will be revealed very soon. A world-shattering wager, if you do not personally participate, how could your life be perfect? Come look, come see. Strong sword versus strong shield. What? No shield. Heavens. Sire, look, is there a stronger, more turtle-like shield than this? This is certainly this year's strongest turtle formation. Look at what Mr. Zuo had named his work. Complete Formation Territory Defense Style. Just this extremely strong name, full of the feeling of security, it is worth you betting on it. The odds are 1 to 500. What? You still aren't satisfied? This one can personally guarantee that there wouldn't be a payment rate better than this. Think about it, last time, our wonderful Zuo had been the main actor of a sky-shattering wagering match. Think about the people that had won so much. My neighbor Wang Xiao'er's and son had just put down 10 pieces of jingshi. Fu Jin's eyes were red as he wagered all the jingshi on his body, muttering to himself, it's not that I favor you. This is a grudge between me and Dong Qi sword sect. The worker at the casino who heard this felt his heart shudder. Dong Qi sword sect was a large sect in Dongfu. Fu Jin recognized Zhongming Yan. It was during that incident, he had been injured by Zhongming Yan and another Dong Qi sword sect disciples. It was also that time that Zuo had stood up for him, and his relationship with Zuo had deepened. His eyes were entirely red as he bit his lips tightly, afraid for Zuo. He had naturally heard of Zhongming Yan's strength. Adding on that the two people had once had a conflict, Zhongming Yan definitely wouldn't have mercy. Zuo's consciousness was better than others and quickly found Zhongming Yan. Zhongming Yan's steps were not fast. Step by step, he headed towards Zuo truthfully. Zuo wanted to run. He might have some hope of victory against the average Xiuzha, but against experts like Zhongming Yan, there wasn't a chance at all. The biggest flaw of the formation defense style he was proud of finally revealed itself. That was, once it started, other than guarding it to the death, there wasn't any other way. The two did not have a happy previous encounter. Due to him, a Dong Qi disciple had been banned from Dongfu. Fine, if he couldn't escape, he wouldn't. Zuo boldened his heart. If he decided to fight, there was a bit of presence. Wasn't it just Zhongming Yan? He looked at the surroundings. The glittering materials were like the sparkling jingshi, glowing with an enchanting light that blinded him. Courage rose in his heart. Gu could use jingshi to smash down Pu Yao, who called himself a Sky Yao. You're just a Ningmai beginner, Ji doesn't believe Ji can't drown you. In reality, Zhuo was not confident at all. He had just made 45 child formations for the Skyring Moon Chime formation. There were still 27 child formations until he reached 72 child formations. Mother and child formations like Skyring Moon Chime formation usually had an attribute. The more child formations they had, the stronger they would be. The growth of power was a nonlinear increase dependent on the number of single child formations, but increased in a pattern of values like 6, 12, 36, etc. The power of 45 child formations was just slightly stronger than 36 child formations. If he could complete 72 child formations, the power of the formation would be the difference between heaven and earth compared to a 36 child formation. It would go up an entire stage. Zhuo estimated that the power of a 72 child formation would be more than 4 times that of a 36 child formation. Of course, there were also differences in the difficulty of setting up the formations. When the number of child formation reached a certain amount, the difficulty would multiply when adding on one more formation. However, this was not the time to consider these things. He had no other choice. Zhongming Yan did not have any intentions of relenting, heading straight for Zhuo. Zhuo didn't hesitate, raising his hand to send out a 5-level multicolored mini pagoda. Once the 5-colored pagoda flew into the air, it grew in size. In the blink of an eye, it was the height of a person. The 5-colored pagoda flew into the sky above the pond. The pond below instantly filled with mist, moisture roiling. The moisture quickly rose up, reaching the base of the 5-color pagoda. From far away, it looked as though the water was supporting the 5-colored pagoda. The light of the 5-color pagoda lit up, the body of the pagoda continuously emitting countless flashes of 5-colored light that entered each formation. Centered around the pond, the jade pieces, copper cauldrons, and formation nails in the Tenmu formation belt lit up. If the formation belt could have been called sparkling before, then right now, it was like a gigantic piece of gold had been embedded into the green landscape, extremely gaudy. Naturally, it received the unanimous disdain of everyone. But when the entire Tenmu of formations completely lit up in the flick of a finger, that blinding scene, how many people had seen anything like it? No one had seen anything like it. Such a large formation belt, it could only appear in the restricted grounds of a sect, and not just any sect. There was none like it even around the sword cave of Wukong Sword Sect. There was none around Dong Fu Hall. Heart Lake Sect did have one, but it had never been activated. The last time it was activated, it was several hundreds of years ago. The densely packed crowds of Xiuzhe around Dong Fu were completely struck dumb by such a spectacular scene. Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping's fight might be more profound and skillful, but in front of such an enormous formation, it became minuscule. With Wei Sheng and Gu Rongping's cultivating stages of Ningami, each sword energy would be 7 or 8 zhang. The longest would be 10 zhang. No matter how magnificent they were, they could not compare to the spectacle of Tenmu of formation being activated at once. For a short moment, all of Dong Fu was completely silent. A moment later, people slowly came out of their shock. Dong Fu instantly exploded. Several 10,000s of Xiuzhe speaking at once, from extremely silent to waves of roaring. Some Xiuzhe that were of weaker cultivation felt their eyes rings and could not hear anything anymore. After a while, their hearing finally recovered. However, everyone's discussion had not stopped. Quite the reverse, it had become even more fierce. Worth it. Definitely enough for me to come this far. Spectacular. As expected, Zhuo really has some abilities, he can also muster up something. What formation seal style? It is just Jinji. As everyone was sighed, the formation was completely activated. The formation belt about Tenmu big suddenly changed. A crescent rose up high over the pond, the light flashing. Inside the formation, green-blue mist rose, blurring the landscape. Inside the mist, countless light rings of various sizes floated in the air, gathering and scattering like a school of nimble fish. On the rooftop of one of Dong Fu's residences, 3 people were standing together. Zhuo truly is a formations genius. Such a short period of time and he could comprehend. Sky-ring moon chime formation, really powerful. Luckily, we did not offend him that day. A red-robed male stared at the mirage and praised. These three were the customers that had Zuemo process the inky black lotus seed. Humph, he's a Juji Shouja. He can only take advantage of outside forces, what can he accomplish? The snarling man snorted. It's good to have low cultivation. The eagle-nosed man said darkly. You want to use force? Don't forget that he has a powerful Shixiang. The snarling male shook his head and said. All three of them were extremely wary due to Wei Xing's strong performance. We don't have enough people. His Shixiang isn't a bad substitute. The eagle-nosed man said. The snarling man still shook his head. He's only in Juji. No matter how skilled his formations are, it is still limited. It's alright as long as he has talent. The red-robed male suddenly opened. This isn't Tianhuan realm, it is not easy to find Shouja skilled in formations. Wei Xing might be powerful, but he is just one person. Us three brothers do not have to be afraid. The red-robed man held great authority among the three. Since he said so, the other two had no objections. Also, what the red-robed man said was the truth. There were many Shouja that knew formations, but those that could be called skilled were extremely rare. Those that had some reputation, either their price was too high, or they were unwilling to risk their own personal safety. The snarling man smiled, and said, that's true. If he dares to have other thoughts, the new Black Lotus Ean banner that we just forged can be tested. The eagle-nosed man furrowed his brows. But how to persuade Zuemo? That guy isn't easy to fool, and we cannot use force. The red-robed male was very confident about this point. He smirked. Temptation. That's easy with someone like Zuemo. Even a person as obsessed with the sword as Wei Xing is won't be immune. As the three talked, Zhongming Yan had reached the edge of the Sky-ring moon chime formation. The moment the formation had activated, Zhongming Yan's mind had blanked for a quick instant, but he quickly recovered. His steps were not rushed or slow, looking like a calm and relaxed expert. Only the shocking presence he was releasing expressed that the desire for battle inside had reached a peak. Zuomo's figure had disappeared into the formation. The blue-green mist spread, forming its own little world. Countless rings of light in various sizes were nimble and lively. Occasionally, 2 rings of light would hit earth other, and chimes like that of glass would sound, clear and crisp. The chiming that passed through the mist were hard to follow, and echoed. What entered the eyes was blue-green mist and the swimming rings of light. Not just Zuemo, even the jade pieces and metal nails on the ground had disappeared. Ding ding dong dong. Zhongming Yan couldn't help but snort. As the first seed of the younger generation of Dong Qi sword sect, he followed his master in cultivating the sword, and had a very basic knowledge of formations. However, so what? He was not afraid in the least. One sword breaks all methods, that was a sword xiu. He had not reached that amazing step, but his opponent was just a Juji. A Shouja only in Juji, could he block the sword? He didn't believe it. As for his conflict with Zuemo, he had long forgotten about it. He had never kept it on his mind. A disciple of his sect being banned, that was because his abilities were not as good as others. He was too lazy to care. He didn't have especially bad feelings about Zuemo. Of course, he didn't have any good feelings either. It was a pity that Yu Bai and Nan Menyang had matched up. He was very regretful as he looked at Yu Bai and Nan Menyang that were fighting heatedly behind him, and then looking at Zuemo ahead, he felt it was very bland. Even if it wasn't Yu Bai, he would be fine with Nan Menyang, but why was it Zuemo? As he sighed in regret, he summoned out his flying sword. This was an extremely unique flying sword. The shape was like a section of old plum. There were many joints on the plum branch, appearing like a bone, old yet resilient. On the plum branch were 7 fresh and blooming plum blossoms, so fresh that they seemed to have just been picked. A faint fragrance floated in the air. 7 plum sword. Zhuo Meitian actually passed 7 plum sword to him. It seems he doesn't have low hopes for Zhong Ming Yan. This is the first sword of Dong Qi sword sect, 7 plum sword. As expected, it is extraordinary. Zhuo Meitian is really brave. Such a good sword, he actually gave it to a Ningmai disciple. Conversation rose, as everyone's expressions were full of awe. 7 plum sword was the most famous flying sword of Dong Qi sword sect, ranked 4th grade. It was most suited to Dong Qi sword sect's plum cutting sword scripture. However, the reason that this sword was so famous was because its owner was Zhuo Meitian. In Sky Moon Jia, Zhuo Meitian was a very famous personage. Everyone was especially wary of his cruelty and ruthlessness. These years, he had not been seen much in public. The rumors had been that he had been focusing on teaching his disciple. Looking at it now, it was true. To pass a great treasure like 7 plum sword to Zhong Ming Yan, it could be seen just how great his love was. The people that had been drooling over 7 plum sword quickly killed their greed. It was easy to deal with the young one. But if they fought the young one, and the old one came, they couldn't deal with that. The faces of the 4 from Wukong sword sect were heavy. Even though they hoped that Zhuo Mo could leave the competition as soon as possible, but when they saw Zhong Ming Yan take out 7 plum sword, their expressions changed slightly. Zhuo Meitian's ruthlessness was famed, and look at it, his disciple Zhong Ming Yan was not a merciful person either. They were not worried that Zhuo Mo would lose the competition, because it was already set in stone. They were worried that Zhuo Mo would be injured. If Zhong Ming Yan was as heartless as his master, Zhuo Meitian, then today, Zhuo Mo was in danger. However, at this time, Zhuo Mo's big formation was already up and running. Through the mirage, it was hard for them to see the situation inside the formation. Inside the blue-green formation, the rings of light danced, a crescent moon hanging over top of it all. In opposition to what everyone had imagined of Zhuo Mo being on guard to face a great enemy, Zhuo Mo was extremely busy. Taking advantage of the cover the formation was, he had silently sneaked to the other end of the formation, continuing to set up child formations for Sky Ring Moon Chime formation. One more child formation, the power of the Sky Ring Moon Chime formation would increase a bit. His movements were extremely quick. After continuously putting down 45 child formations, he was extremely practiced. He guessed that Zhong Ming Yan would try to test the waters in the beginning, so he decided to make good use of the time. You hit, I set. Wasn't it just competition on speed? Let's see if you first break the formation, or I first finish the formation. Zhuo Mo thought hatefully inside, his hands moving even quickly. No one would have thought that in such a time of emergency, Zhuo Mo was still persisting in laying down formations. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.